Archaea, the home of arcane arts. Once it was a mighty nation of arcanists whose progenies lived and breathed magic. But when mankind was stripped of this blessing, Archaea lost its glory and diminished into a weak shadow of its former self. Left at the mercy of greater powers, the nation pinned its hopes on its only remaining means of survival, a marriage alliance. And this is the fate of our protagonist. In the castle of Archaea, a young man with blonde hair hurriedly enters one of the chambers. Clearly in shock and with his voice choked by disbelief, he demands to be told that this is not true. This young man is Xander Catterell, the second prince of Archaea. With a worried look, he faces his sister, pleading for her to reconsider her decision. "Speak softly, Xander," reprimands the blonde man standing in the room. Meanwhile, a beautiful woman with long, golden hair remains seated in silence, her gaze heavy with a mix of concern and sadness. The atmosphere in the chamber is heavy, almost funereal. The man standing is, in fact, Dietrich Catterell, the first prince of Archaea. He continues to scold his brother, stating that this is not a matter for outsiders. But Xander refuses to listen to his brother, considering the whole situation absurd. How could Dietrich force their own sister to become the wife of Canuck Riadon? Upon hearing those words, the seated woman tightly grips the fabric of her dress. Xander, filled with fury, confronts his brother, asking if he has any idea of the rumors circulating. They say that Archaea bought a cowardly peace by prostituting its princess to the enemy, turning her into a mere royal toy for the bloodthirsty tyrant who reaped thousands of lives just for fun. Almost desperately, Xander demands an answer from Dietrich. Why did he do that? With her long golden hair framing her serene face, Eusebia raises her firm gaze to Xander. "Enough," says Eusebia Catterell, the first princess of Archaea and our protagonist in this story. "But Bia," says Xander with a sad look at his sister. Eusebia then explains that the decision was hers, not Dietrich's. It was she who wanted this marriage. She explains to her brother that there is no room for discussion. It was a decision she made, and that is final. She adds that he should worry about other matters now. With tears filling his eyes, he continues trying to argue with his sister. Bia assures her brother that she will be fine and that, from now on, it is his duty to take care of their father and follow Dietrich's guidance. Xander, still unwilling to believe, kneels close to his sister. Xander, worried about his sister's future, leans over her lap and begins to cry. Meanwhile, Bia gently strokes his hair, wishing for him to take care of himself and be well. With a distant look, Dietrich observes the scene in silence. He then thanks Eusebia as he approaches her, saying that the people of Archaea owe their lives to her for what she is doing for them. Bia takes on a serious expression upon hearing her brother's words. She always knew that, for a woman born into royalty, a marriage for love was something unlikely, but she never imagined that her marriage would be the only salvation for Archaea. She knows she should not lament her fate and instead should feel honored to be able to help her people. The scene transitions to Eusebia's wedding. She stands before Canuck Riadon as the priest asks if she accepts him as her future husband. She says that she accepts while observing her future husband through the veil. Although a wedding is usually a festive moment filled with joy, the atmosphere was serious and cold. So this is the Emperor of Riadon, Bia thinks as she observes him. The priest declares them husband and wife and asks them to seal the commitment with a kiss. Canuck removes the veil covering Bia's face, while she instinctively shrinks back. She sees him clearly for the first time without the veil obscuring her view, and he asks her to close her eyes. Bia tightly closes her eyes as Canuck's lips approach hers. They kiss. It is an awkward kiss, but it still makes Bia blush. Their lips part, sealing Bia's and Archaea's fate. Bia is clearly embarrassed by the kiss and thoughtfully touches her lips. Canuck, noticing this, asks if she is okay. She does not respond, only looks at him shyly, aware that now that they have kissed before God and all those present, there is no turning back. From today on, the man in front of her is her husband. After the ceremony, the Riadon entourage prepares to depart. Mounted soldiers follow under Canuck's leadership, and right behind comes the royal carriage carrying Eusebia. Bia is sitting alone in the carriage, her gaze sad. She thinks about how everything happened so quickly, and it makes her feel like a hostage being taken by force. Thoughtful, she acknowledges that it's not quite like that. Since Riadon is a newborn empire, it makes sense that its emperor wouldn't stay distant for long. Perhaps Canuck is a good leader, an emperor who puts the kingdom above himself. Although the rumors surrounding him label him as a butcher and a tyrant, Bia remembers. She opens the carriage window and, leaning a bit, observes the nights ahead. Seeing Kanash in person, she cannot deny that he is a man of presence, almost as if there is something divine about him. She clearly realizes that he inspires respect in everyone around him, unlike her, a sheltered princess who has never had real experience of the world. Compared to him, she feels powerless. Thoughtful, Bia knows that the Cataril lineage, being the ruling house of Archaea, received the blessing of Arganwood. This means that, in each generation, a member of the Cataril lineage awakens to master the primordial magic that flows from the depths of the earth. And this person must use the magic to protect the kingdom as its guardian. She knew she was meant to take on this role in this generation, as she had been chosen by Arganwood as the guardian. With a slight self-deprecating smile, Eusebia acknowledges that the magic she possesses is so weak and limited that it would never be enough to make her a true guardian. Therefore, for someone who saw herself as a failure, accepting the marriage to save the kingdom was the least Eusebia could do for her people. She wonders if she will be able to bear the weight of being the Empress consort. Perhaps she would be cast aside when the Emperor grew tired of her. Feeling weak, Bia thinks to herself that she is pathetic. While Bia is immersed in her thoughts, a hooded figure can be seen in the distance, among the trees. The figure begins to conjure some kind of magic, forming a black energy in its hands. A quick flash catches Eusebia's attention, who looks curiously through the trees. She sees an arrow of black energy swiftly crossing the air towards her. Soon after, a loud crash resonates through the forest. The sound alerts everyone and makes them stop. Kanak, who is further ahead, quickly returns to check, asking the soldiers what happened, with a tone of concern in his voice. They inform their emperor that the Empress's carriage has been attacked. And the Empress? How is she? Is she all right? Kanak asks in panic as he approaches the carriage. Inside the carriage, Eusebia stumbles, her gaze stunned, unable to believe what is happening. With a trembling hand, she touches her chest and feels the arrow of black energy embedded in her body. We are transported to Bia's memories. Probably a few days before the wedding, Eusebia is venting to her brother Dietrich, saying that she doesn't want to leave for Riadon or marry a horrible man like Kanak. She cries at the thought and, filled with fear, begs her brother to find another way to save the kingdom. Dietrich looks her in the eyes and says that it pains him to see his sister suffer, but he asks what else they could do. While stroking his sister's cheek, Dietrich explains that Archaea is dying and that they have no resources against the power of Riadon. He reminds her that the army is exhausted. The coffers are empty, and no nearby kingdom is willing to help Archaea. Looking into his sister's tear-filled eyes, he says that if only they had a bearer of supreme magic to protect Archaea like in the past, perhaps things could be different. But unfortunately, that is not the reality, and they need to do whatever it takes to survive. And with those words from Dietrich, the scene returns to the present. Eusebia, weakened, is sitting on the floor of the carriage with an arrow embedded in her chest. Remembering this, Eusebia thinks that her brother was right. If she had enough power to be a true guardian, everything could be different. Perhaps she could have been more useful to the people of Archaea, and things would have been different. After this thought, Eusebia faints. She hears the screams calling for the Empress, and then the desperate voice of Kanak asking her to wake up. Then, Eusebia awakens startled. Confused, she remembers being hit by an arrow. But after that, she remembers nothing else. Eusebia hears Kanak, desperate, calling her name behind her and turns to look. She sees him holding her unconscious body in his arms. Almost crying, Kanak whispers, pleading for her to open her eyes. Confused, she panics upon seeing her body in Kanak's arms. The soldiers, worried to see Kanak's despair, comment that they believe the Empress has already passed away. He pulls her body against him and murmurs softly that it was his fault. Still holding her in his arms, he says he was foolish to trust the northern dogs. Consumed by rage, he says he should never have agreed to participate in their little game. Eusebia, in a ghostly form, shows concern. He turns to the soldiers and declares that the alliance is annulled. Gritting his teeth, he swears that Archaea will pay for the betrayal with its own blood. As he orders his soldiers to hurry home and prepare for war, Eusebia screams, trying to stop him. But Kanak seems unable to hear or see her. The pain is so intense that she feels as if something is tearing her chest apart. Despair overtakes her as she realizes what is happening, while the pain causes her to fall to the ground. She knows that if she does nothing, Archaea will be destroyed. As the soldiers and Kanak depart, Eusebia, still agonizing on the ground, sees someone approaching. The person touches the dry blood on the ground while saying, "Poor, poor creature." You stopped breathing even before the blood on the ground had dried? Dietrich, thinks Eusebia as she notices the movement near her. In her ghostly form, she begins to crawl towards him, confident that he might be able to see her. But as she gets closer, a man appears before Dietrich, saying that finally the plan seems to be going in the right direction, and that His Highness must be pleased with the progress. Dietrich, still looking at the blood on his hands, replies that he certainly is. With a cold smile on his face, he looks at the man and says that he is extremely pleased to have finally rid himself of the nuisance that was Eusebia. Bia is in shock upon hearing the words coming from her brother's mouth. Dietrich stands up and walks towards the hooded man. He says it is a shame they took his sister's body, as he would have liked to confirm her death personally. But the hooded man reassures him. He assures that the arrow pierced her heart and that there was no way she could have survived. Meanwhile, Eusebia watches the conversation completely incredulous. Dietrich points at the hooded man, reminding him that the agreement between them is not yet over. He states that he only allowed him to deal with his sister as he saw fit, because the man had promised to give Dietrich the power to destroy Riadon. Smiling confidently, the hooded man asserts that His Highness will be pleased to know that the approaching war will end with Archaea's triumph, and that, under King Dietrich's command, Archaea will triumph as an empire that spans the entire continent. After saying this, the hooded man begins to walk towards Eusebia's ghost, stating that the biggest problem with Canuck taking her body is that, having been born as a mage, she could have been useful. It is truly a shame, he concludes as he passes through Eusebia's ghostly body, which remains in shock with everything she hears. She mentally wonders why, trying to understand and remembering how close she and Dietrich were when they were children. Eusebia remains alone, fallen in her spectral form beside the abandoned carriage. The silence of the crime scene envelops her, leaving her surrendered only to her own thoughts. And so, as the hooded man had promised, a bitter war broke out between Archaea and Riadon in the months that followed. And, in the meantime, she became a ghost, trapped in the forest where she was killed, forced to watch the tragedy of her kingdom unfold before her eyes. A true hell, being forced to see everything and being able to do nothing. Time passed slowly. It was torturous for her, and the war showed no signs of ending anytime soon. Accusing Riadon of murdering a princess of Archaea, Dietrich tried to win the war by rallying the outraged northern kingdoms under his banner. But it didn't take long for Canuck to destroy them all. He won battle after battle, bringing Archaea closer and closer to destruction. With the war, everything lost its meaning. The forests and blooming fields of beautiful Archaea were reduced to ruins. The people of Archaea were still, the people Eusebia loved most. She was forced to witness their lives fading before her eyes. After 3 years of war, Dietrich was finally captured and brought to trial before Emperor Canuck. And, even close to the end, Dietrich did not seem remorseful for anything he had done. Before Canuck, he merely insulted him, calling him a filthy slave, and swore that, even having killed his family and plundered that noble land, he would still never truly win. For the Catterall family would haunt him for the rest of his life. Canuck stares at Dietrich with a half-cold smile and replies that he hopes his delusions never cease. In this way, he will be able to follow the mad screams of the king of Archaea even after death, and kill him once more, declares Canuck, filled with hatred, as he raises his sword against Dietrich. A loud slash echoes through the forest as Canuck finally attacks Dietrich. Eusebia covers her mouth in shock, her eyes wide and filled with horror. A strong sound of something heavy falling to the ground echoes, marking the brutal impact of her brother's end. The silhouette of Canuck rises imposing, holding the bloodied sword, marking the end of the war and the defeat of Archaea. Among swords embedded in the bloodied ground, the spirit of Eusebia appears, bent in sadness. With a choked voice, she calls for her brother. She asks if his ambition was really worth the sacrifice of her sister's life. His brother, their father, and his beloved Archaea. Bia laughs sickly, as if she has finally reached her limit. She looks thoughtfully at the sky and says, "Hear me, Arganwood. Listen to my pleas and grace me with your power and mercy. Take my soul and in return grant a new chance for our Archaea." Bia screams in despair. At that moment, a small greenish light begins to shine near her. With tears streaming down her face, Eusebia begs Arganwood to grant her help to start over and prevent all that tragedy from happening. "Eusebia, my dear child," responds a voice as the greenish light shines more brightly. That light envelops everything around, responding to Eusebia's cry. A voice continues to speak, now muffled and incomprehensible. Bia loses consciousness. The scene cuts to her slowly opening her eyes, blinking in confusion. When her vision comes back into focus, she sees the younger, worried faces of her father and her younger brother. Both breathe a sigh of relief and show their happiness upon seeing that she has finally woken up. Eusebia blinks, now even more confused. Xander wraps her in a tight hug, while their father simply smiles, relieved. The only thing she can murmur is, "But how?" The scene advances, showing Eusebia sitting on the bed next to Xander, both visibly younger. She remains silent, trying to organize her thoughts and understand what could have happened. None of it seems real to her. She had seen with her own eyes when they died in the war. Even so, they were there before her, alive and well. Thinking about this, Eusebia turns to her father, who was talking to the royal doctor. He was explaining to the king that the young woman's malaise was just a side effect of awakening her powers. The doctor declares that the change in hair and eye color, combined with the recent malaise, is clear evidence that Eusebia has been chosen to take on the role of guardian of Archaea. However, he emphasizes that little is known about what powers she may manifest, as the last guardian had emerged over 100 years ago. Upon hearing those words, Eusebia remembers that magic awakened within her when she was 10 years old. The revelation hits her like lightning. It could only mean one thing. She had gone back in time? Still incredulous, Eusebia begins to tremble as she remembers all the horrors she was forced to witness. Perhaps, she thinks, she had finally gone mad, and all of this was just her mind creating a cruel hallucination. Xander, noticing his sister trembling, immediately becomes worried. With a voice full of affection, he says he doesn't want to see her sick, that he wishes to spend many, many years by her side. Hearing her brother act so familiarly, Eusebia slowly turns to him. She extends her hands toward his face. Feeling Xander's soft, warm face under her fingers, Eusebia convinces herself that this could not be a hallucination. Relieved, Eusebia rests her head on Xander's shoulder. She begins to cry as she realizes that Arganwood truly heard her prayers. Overcome with emotion, she hugs Xander tightly. Both Xander and their father are confused by Bia's intense reaction. But in silence, she thanks Arganwood for granting her a new chance and promises that she will not waste this opportunity. This time, she will protect her family and her kingdom at all costs. And for that, she knows she will need power, a power stronger than she had in the past. Our protagonist tells us about Arganwood, the patron goddess of Archaea. In life, she had been the human sister of the goddess Fehar, but after her death, she was reborn as the great silver tree in the forest, at the edge of the world, which became her tomb. The kingdom of Archaea bordered this sacred ground. The people of Archaea began to worship and revere Arganwood, and the forest, in return, granted its grace to them. Those who received Arganwood's blessing became guardians of Archaea, heroes tasked with protecting the people from any disaster or enemy. And without guardians to keep the kingdom protected, Archaea was on the brink of total collapse. When the guardian powers awakened in Eusebia, it was as if a spark of hope had ignited for the people of Archaea. She was the delight and treasure of the kingdom, until they discovered that she could not use her magic the way they desired and expected. Eusebia's power was limited to the ability to speak with trees and flowers, and no matter how kind the trees were to her, Eusebia felt like a failure as a guardian. After all, kindness was not enough in the face of the discontent of all the people of Archaea. Remembering how, in her past life, she could only watch helplessly as Archaea faced destruction, Eusebia was determined to make things different this time. After all, Arganwood would not have granted her wish if it did not give her the power to change the past. As she thinks about all this, Eusebia channels her power into the vase in front of her, and the effort is so great that it begins to glow. From the intense glow in the vase, a small green sprout emerges, softly shimmering as particles of light dance around it. Eusebia is surprised to see the sprout grow, but she is not impressed. She expected something bigger, stronger, worthy of a guardian. In silence, she wonders why Arganwood would bring her back to life without giving her the power she truly needs. Compared to the past, she clearly feels that her magic is stronger. But still, it does not seem enough. To save Archaea from Canuck. Her thoughts are interrupted by knocks on the door. A familiar voice greets her, and she immediately startles. Her body reacts instinctively, as if that sound awakened uncomfortable memories. Dietrich is leaning against the doorframe of Eusebia's room, greeting her. "Brother?" she replies, clearly uncomfortable. Ignoring his sister's reaction, Dietrich enters the room and comments that he heard about her magic awakening. Still smiling, Dietrich remarks that the awakening of his sister's magic involved a great deal of pain, or at least that is what he heard. As she looks at him, Eusebia can almost hear the older version of him from her past life echoing in her mind, talking about her death with the same sarcastic tone. She begins to hallucinate, mixing past and present. Before her eyes, an adult Dietrich appears, his hand firmly gripping her neck while a cruel smile spreads across his face. He mocks her death, each word laden with scorn. Instinctively, she slaps his hand away, pushing him back. In the blink of an eye, she returns to the present, where she sees the younger Dietrich in front of her, surprised by her reaction. Realizing what she just did, she quickly apologizes to her brother, saying that she still feels a bit unwell. And she adds that she is sure he will understand that she is not in a good moment. Dietrich, clearly irritated, responds that, of course, he understands. After all, his poor sister must be exhausted. He holds Eusebia's hands, making her visibly uncomfortable, and wishes for her to recover soon. Everything he says sounds like a lie to Eusebia. She cannot, and should not, trust any word that comes out of her brother's mouth. Perhaps this is because in her past life she saw his true colors. She begins to pull her hands away, asking her brother to let her go, but he still holds them firmly, saying he is sorry to have to bring her bad news just when she is in such a fragile moment. Bia is surprised and, with a worried voice, questions her brother about what he means by bad news. With a disdainful smile, he replies that instead of celebrating the new guardian of Archaea, many people have begun to question Arganwood's wisdom. Dietrich states, in a provocative tone, that many have dared to doubt the magical power of the new princess guardian. Bia is surprised and begins to respond, but Dietrich interrupts her, asserting that he does not believe in the blasphemy of these people and that his sister's awakening was a true miracle. He continues in a cynical tone, "But you know what they say. Where there's smoke, there's fire. Perhaps people are just desperate for the guardian they have long awaited to show the full extent of her power." Dietrich concludes. Bia begins to try to explain herself, incredulous at what she is hearing. But Dietrich interrupts her again, saying that she should not blame herself, that the real blame lies with the people for creating such high expectations for a simple little girl. Dietrich's words and tone remind her of her past life, when she ran to him, excited, to tell him that she had managed to use magic. When she said, full of enthusiasm, how incredible it had been to see the memories and hear the stories of the flowers, and how excited she was to discover more and more about her magic. She recalls her brother's sarcastic and cruel smile, telling her that rumors were circulating about her power, that what she called magic seemed merely a cheap trick, and that everyone was extremely disappointed. And because of that, he claimed that she should hide that pathetic magic and not worry, for he would protect her. And hearing her brother's words, she hid her powers, which made people anxious and start to question when they would finally see the gifts of the guardian. Rumors began to circulate that perhaps what the princess had received was not a blessing, but rather a curse. And in this way, she blindly trusted her brother, and ended up being betrayed by him. Remembering her death in her past life makes Eusebia return from her thoughts, feeling slightly dizzy. Dietrich, seeing his sister like this, asks if she is okay, but she cannot respond. Ghostly hands rest on Eusebia's shoulders, and a mocking voice whispers, "Just look at you, still so weak." The ghost of her past life envelops her from behind in a suffocating embrace, whispering with disdain, "How could someone still so weak be capable of protecting Archaea? You can do nothing." In panic, Bia tries to convince herself that this is just a trick of her mind, that it is not real. Still, her ghostly self continues to speak, saying that she was never chosen by Arganwood, that she did not earn a second chance, and that her goddess only wanted to see her suffer in despair once again. Frightened, Eusebia tries to free herself from the ghost of her past life, desperately moving her arms to push it away, while in her mind she denies everything she heard. Dietrich, still in the room, watches his sister with a confused expression at her reaction. With the ghostly figure disappearing, Eusebia breathes heavily, but relieved. He asks again if she is okay, and she quickly replies that she is. The ghostly figure from her past returns and envelops her in a dark embrace, but despite being shaken, Eusebia remains firm. She knows she needs to go to Arganwood, discover the truth, and eliminate the doubt in her mind once and for all. She needs to know if all of this is just a whim of a deity, or if there is a greater purpose. Determined, she promises herself that she will find out what Arganwood really wants from her, even if it is the last thing she does. The scene cuts to Eusebia, accompanied by 2 guards, walking through a snowstorm in the wild forests of the north on the edges of the world. The guards are worried about her, advising that she should return as the snowstorm is intensifying. But Bia stares at them with a determined look. Holding a necklace shaped like an amulet, with a red stone in the center, she declares that she cannot return. At least, not yet. We are transported to Eusebia's memories a few days earlier. She is talking to her father, asking for permission to go to the wild forests, and he shows concern at his daughter's request. Sensing her father's worry, she explains that now that she is awakened, she needs to present herself to Arganwood. Her father explains that no one besides the monarchs of Archaea can enter the presence of Arganwood. Even the kings of Archaea are entitled to only one audience in their lifetime. He recalls that once he knelt on the sacred ground and begged Arganwood to resurrect the queen. But the goddess refused to listen to his prayers, no matter how intense and fervent they were. Arganwood responded by saying that resurrection was against the will of the goddess Fihar. In the end, all that was left for me was pain and a weakened body, marked by the biting cold of those dark forests, says the king, bitterly as he recalls the past. He gently touches his daughter's face, fearing that something terrible will happen if she goes to the wild forest. But Bia reassures him, saying that she will be fine and promises to return safe and sound. She asserts that, as the guardian of Archaea and princess of the bloodline chosen by Arganwood, she is sure that the goddess will not harm her. However, she needs direction to know how to save the kingdom. Understanding his daughter's need, the king begins to search for something inside his coat. He pulls out a necklace with a red stone from inside the coat and hands it to Eusebia, telling her to take it with her. He explains that the necklace is actually a magical item forged by dwarves, capable of preserving warmth, and asserts that he is sure it will be useful to protect her in the snowstorm. We return to the present as Eusebia looks at the necklace in her hands. She knows she will be able to continue, for the necklace is protecting her from the cold. She clutches the necklace between her 2 hands while whispering a thank you to her father for the help. In a silent promise that she will not lose the people she loves anymore, that she will do everything to change the fate of all and save them. She kneels on the sacred ground and places her bare hands on the ground. Although she knows her magic is still weak, she remembers how to use the ability she had in her past life. An intense light shines, and a magic circle forms beneath Bia as she tries to use her magic to communicate with the trees of the forest. Focusing, she pleads with the trees for an audience with Arganwood. She asks for permission to enter the forest. Suddenly, the snowstorm begins to weaken. Bia believes this can only be a sign that Arganwood has heard her. She turns to the guards and asks them to wait for her there, assuring them that she will return soon. And then, she disappears, entering the forest. The cold is much more intense inside the forest, as if her bones are freezing. Even so, Bia continues to move forward, determined, until a warm, glowing breeze envelops her, and she hears Arganwood's voice greeting her. She looks ahead, and as the snowstorm dissipates, she sees an imposing tree with silver leaves, and she is sure that is Arganwood. So, we meet again. What brings you to me this time? Says Arganwood. Eusebia is surprised to recognize the voice, the same one she heard calling her before she went back in time. Eusebia then politely asks for guidance. She questions the purpose for which she was brought back to life and what she must do to prevent the terrible future she witnessed. She pleads with Arganwood to grant her more power to protect the people of Archaea, and in return promises to be the instrument of the goddess's divine will. But before she can continue, Arganwood interrupts her. The goddess says, "It seems you have deluded yourself." She explains that she has indeed been watching her all this time, but has never answered her pleas. That this privilege is granted only to the monarchs of Archaea, and only to them, but that no one should know this. Ashamed, Bia explains that she knows this, but insists that she is sure it was the goddess's voice she heard in her past life, and that she thought it was she who brought her to life and gave her a second chance. Go home, Eusebia. Your fragile mortal body cannot withstand the intense cold of these forests. Not even the dwarf's necklace will protect you for much longer. Leave, before you share the same fate as your father, says the goddess. I don't care, says Bia, opening her arms before Arganwood. I would rather die here than watch everyone I love perish in the war without being able to stop it. She screams towards the goddess. The goddess calls her by name in a reprimanding tone, and Eusebia raises her eyes to Arganwood on the verge of tears, whispering a fragile, "Please." She kneels before the grand tree and begs to be allowed to protect everyone this time. to be allowed to save Archaea. Please, tell me what I can do. Bia pleads, her voice trembling. Arganwood's voice echoes firmly among the silver trees. If this is your determination, it leaves me no choice. Although you were a guardian, your magic was weak, because I no longer had enough power to share. For this reason, I carry part of the blame for the pain you suffered in your past life. Therefore, I have decided to share with you what remains of my life force. Perhaps this way you can challenge fate and change the future of Archaea. As she utters these words, Arganwood emanates a greenish light that projects towards Eusebia. At that moment, Eusebia's insecurities begin to torment her again, and she hears the voice of the ghost from her past whispering, "You must not believe the goddess." The ghost envelops her in a suffocating embrace and begins to implant insecurities in her mind, whispering that she will not be able to change anything, and that she is destined to have a miserable death again. In the background, however, the goddess's voice resonates firmly, saying that Eusebia needs to follow her heart, and that if she does, nothing can stop her. Refuting the ghost's words, Eusebia places her hands on the ground and invokes Arganwood's power, shouting that she will not give up. Even if her destiny is to die, she refuses to surrender. From the point where Bia's hands touch the ground, green, vibrant, energy-filled shoots begin to sprout. The shoots transform into green, sturdy branches that begin to rise towards the sky, as Arganwood's energy flows even more intensely through Eusebia. "I will no longer succumb to my fears," Eusebia screams, making a promise to herself. The scene cuts to a military stronghold, with wooden walls reinforced by vigorous green vines. One of the guards on duty yawns, almost falling asleep. His superior passes by, sees the scene, and gives him a slap on the back of the neck, reprimanding him to stay alert. The guard apologizes, but the superior reminds him that, even with the recent tranquility, he is still a border guard. The superior then notices someone approaching. Eusebia approaches, escorted by 2 guards. Now, at 20 years old, it is clear that the story has advanced 10 years since her last encounter with Arganwood. The captain talks to Bia as if he sees her frequently. He says that since she started helping to guard the kingdom's borders, casualties have decreased significantly. She smiles and says she is happy to help. The captain emphasizes that calling it help is an understatement. He comments that the thorny bushes she conjured on the walls have doubled the fort's defensive capacity. Furthermore, the shields and arrows she created have proven to be extremely effective, even against monsters. The captain looks at her sincerely, apologizes if it sounds inappropriate, but admits that he feels a bond of camaraderie with her, as if they had faced a war side by side. Upon hearing the word war, Bia gives a slightly bitter smile, remembering the 3 long years she witnessed the horrors of war as a ghost in her last life. She softens her smile and comments that the captain is more perceptive than he appears. He, confused, watches her without fully understanding what she meant. Bia tells us that it has been 10 years since she traveled through time, and that during this period, she has dedicated herself intensely to her studies. Moreover, she has learned to use her magic more effectively. The blessing of Arganwood has strengthened her powers, and over time, Bia has developed the ability to accelerate and modify the growth of plants. But all this evolution came at a cost. Eusebia had to dedicate herself intensely over the last 10 years, often studying until exhaustion. Even in this life, Eusebia continued to hear disturbing news about Riadon and its emperor, Kanak. The fact that Riadon was expanding faster than in her past life was concerning, as they would soon reach Archaea. No matter how much the kingdom's military strength improved under her command, Eusebia knew they were still not strong enough to defeat Kanak and his empire. Even so, Bia was determined not to let Kanak destroy Archaea this time. Eusebia's thoughts are interrupted by a guard who runs up to her and the captain. He announces that he brings urgent news about Kanak and the Riadon Empire. Bia is surprised but is willing to do anything to save her kingdom, even if it means having to marry Kanak. The scene cuts to the castle of Archaea, where a messenger reads Kanak's message. In it, he asks for only one thing: the princess of Archaea. Nothing more. Upon hearing this, one of the nobles present in the meeting room with Eusebia stands up angrily, calling Kanak's request absurd. Another noble then declares that a savage like him will never have the princess of Archaea. While the nobles argue, Bia continues sipping her tea. She can't help but compare their attitude today with that of her past life. Before, the same people who gave up on her without hesitation now show indignation at Kanak's request, only because the current Eusebia has proven to be useful to the kingdom in this life. The only thing that hasn't changed from the past was Kanak's request. He, a slave who broke his chains to rise as emperor. His struggles may have been just as hard, or even more degrading than the life I had to endure. Is that what turned him into such a cruel and relentless man? Thinks Eusebia. But that's not my concern, she concludes. Dietrich, who is also in the room, asks the nobles what they suggest doing, since they are so outraged by Kanak's proposal. He makes it clear in his tone that he hopes they do not believe Archaea has a chance of winning a war against the forces of Riadon. As much as it pains me, I, as the crown prince of Archaea, must think of my kingdom before myself, declares Dietrich in an almost dramatic performance. Eusebia, watching the scene, can only think about how false her brother is. All that posturing, when deep down he just wants to get rid of her. He continues looking at his sister with a smile, certain that he will have her understanding. After all, she is the guardian of Archaea. With a smile on her face, Bia assures her brother that she understands the situation. Then, confidently, Eusebia declares that she has been waiting for this opportunity her whole life. A week passes. Dietrich enters Eusebia's chambers, congratulating her on her engagement. She, serious, asks why he came to bother her so late at night. Pretending to be offended by his sister's coldness, he replies that he just wanted to say goodbye, since she will be leaving for Riadon the next day after the wedding. He continues with the drama, stating that they will not see each other often anymore and that she should be kinder to her brother. Bia interrupts him, saying she prefers to keep his conversations brief. Annoyed, he throws a blue necklace onto the table in front of Bia. She picks up the necklace, curious, and as she examines it, Dietrich explains that it is not just an ornament. It is a communication crystal, an item that allows communication over long distances. He leans over the table towards Bia and orders her to take the necklace with her, reporting everything she discovers about Kanak while she is in Riadon. But Dietrich says that the marriage is just a temporary alliance, a perfect excuse to buy time and gain knowledge about Riadon. Worried, Bia gets up from her chair and warns her brother that things will not end well if Kanak finds out, and that this could lead to war. Could it? Ah, my sweet and innocent sister, replies Dietrich sarcastically. There will be a war. We are just preparing better for it. That is the real reason I came to see you tonight, reveals Dietrich, leaving Eusebia in shock. Dietrich continues, his voice laden with confidence. An ally with unimaginable powers? How did I not realize it before? Dietrich could not have obtained such a rare magical item so easily. Only a powerful sorcerer could have created this for him, concludes Bia in her thoughts. Again, Dietrich must have allied himself with that hooded man who attacked Eusebia in her past life. And besides that, he had found another reason to ally with the other kingdoms of the continent. This way, a new great war was inevitable. Eusebia is pulled from her thoughts when Dietrich demands an answer from her. She knows that if she refuses his request, Dietrich will likely resort to the other alternative, to kill her. Is there really no way to prevent destiny from repeating itself? I really thought I would be able to prevent the war with all the effort I put in over the last 10 years. But are we doomed to repeat the same fate? Reflects Eusebia, filled with doubt and despair. Seeing her sister's silence, Dietrich asks if she really believed that the simple fact of marrying Kanak would bring peace to Archaea. He continues in a sarcastic tone, saying that he had no idea how foolish and blind his sister was. Bia, realizing that her brother knows more than he is revealing, directly questions him about what he means. Dietrich throws a stack of papers onto the table and says he brought those secret documents especially for her. He reveals that the guardians of Archaea are cursed to remain sterile for their entire lives, as becoming a guardian means relinquishing their entire being to serve Arganwood. Besides being unable to use their magic outside the realm of Archaea, they will also be unable to pass on magic to their children, because her body lost the ability to reproduce the moment Arganwood chose her as a guardian. In shock from what she heard from Dietrich, Eusebia stares at him and says that he is lying, but he assures her that it is all true, claiming to have found this information in secret documents from the library, to which only kings have access. Imagine Kanak's fury and disappointment when he discovers that the bride he bought in exchange for a peace alliance is sterile and unable to give him heirs. Provokes Dietrich, moving closer to Bia. Whispering in her ear, he concludes that Kanash will burn Archaea until only ashes remain to calm his fury. Bia stands up, pushing her brother away from her, saying that she is tired of hearing his lies. Dietrich grabs her shoulder and says that she does not need to believe his word. Just think logically. Isn't it strange that, no matter how rich the available information is, the names of Guardian's children have never been mentioned in the kingdom's books? Bia is in shock, staring at her brother as she struggles in her mind to decide if this could really be true. At that moment, the scene transitions to a lake. The silhouette of a man is reflected in the water of the lake, which is now stained with blood. "They attacked us as soon as we crossed the border," says Kanak, naked as he washes himself after the ambush. One of his soldiers brings him new clothes and comments that it is not so surprising that they attacked, since they knew Kanak would not be wearing armor, making him an easier target to take down. "Shut up and give me those clothes already. After all, I need to be clean and presentable before receiving a princess," says Kanak, extending his hand towards the soldier. The next day, we see Bia on the castle balcony. One of her maids asks her to come inside, as it is cold and she might catch a cold. The maid, worried to see the princess so pale on her wedding day, asks if something is bothering her, as she seems to have not slept well the night before. The comment from her maid makes Bia remember the conversation she had with Dietrich the night before. After the conversation with her brother, Eusebia spent the night awake reading books about the history of Archaea. No book mentions the name of children born to guardians. It makes sense that a child conceived by a mage would inherit the ability to use magic from their father or mother. Eusebia becomes anxious, fearing that the most likely reason Kanak insists on marrying her is to ensure heirs capable of using magic. But unlike mages, the magic of guardians comes from the blessing of the goddess Arganwood. It is not something they are born with, but something they gain during life after being chosen by the goddess. She concludes that Dietrich was right, and guardians cannot have children. But what should she do? If Kanak finds out, he will annul the marriage and break the alliance. Bia is pulled from her thoughts by the guards' voices announcing the arrival of the Emperor of Riadon. She turns her attention to the Riadon delegation, entering the gates of the castle of Archaea, led by Kanak, who pauses for a second upon noticing that she is watching him, causing their gazes to meet for a moment. In one of the castle's rooms, she searches her mind for what she might do about her newly discovered problem. She bites her nail anxiously, forcing herself to think. She recalls that, the night before, her brother tried to convince her to join him instead of simply killing her as he had done in her past life. He even revealed the truth about the Guardians, using it as a push for her to accept his proposal. Although this represents a good evolution compared to the past, Eusebia is sure that Dietrich still sees her only as a useful piece in his game. So, at least for Dietrich, as long as she remains useful, he will think twice before killing her. Perhaps if she does the same thing with the Emperor, things will work out. As long as she can keep the secret of being infertile. As soon as she concludes her thoughts, the door to the room opens abruptly, startling her slightly. Kanak approaches Bia, looking a bit anxious, as she stands up and begins to move closer to him. She maintains the appropriate etiquette for the occasion and says she is honored to finally meet him in person. The Emperor delicately extends his hand towards Bia's face. Instinctively, she takes a small step back when his hand touches her cheek. Kanak is surprised by the reaction of his future wife. "You seem unhappy with this arranged marriage," he comments. Eusebia tries to correct the Emperor's impression, stating that he is mistaken and that, in fact, she feels immensely honored and grateful for the chance to become Empress Consort. But he interrupts her, saying that her lies are as lovely as her beautiful lips. Addressing him as Your Majesty, she asserts that she would never dare to lie to him. However, the Emperor seems frustrated with the formal and cold tone with which he is being treated. He asks her to stop calling him Your Majesty, saying he prefers that she call him by his name, if that is not a problem for her. Confused, she apologizes if she has offended him, explaining that etiquette requires her to address him this way. Kanak interrupts her, asking if, should he start calling her by her name, she would also call him that. Bia is left speechless, as such an interaction had never happened in her past life. "Eusebia," says Kanak in a firm tone as he looks her in the eyes. Noticing Bia's lack of response, Kanak asks if she at least knows his name. She promptly replies that yes, she knows. She looks at him for a moment and, embarrassed, pronounces his name. Kanak. The scene cuts to Eusebia's maid with tears in her eyes, impressed by her beauty in her wedding dress. She wipes her tears and says it breaks her heart to see the princess forced into such a hastily arranged marriage. She claims that the princess deserves much more than that. But Bia, looking at herself in the mirror, says she feels absolutely beautiful. She remembers that the dress she is wearing now is much more beautiful and extravagant than the one she wore in her previous life. Still crying, the maid hugs Bia around the waist, begging her not to abandon her. Eusebia gently tries to console her. Bia knows that leaving the Empire would mean putting her life at risk. especially since the man she is going to marry has taken her kingdom hostage, hoping that his empress will be able to give him children with the power to use magic. As she walks with her wedding dress towards the altar, she is sure that her thoughts are correct, and to protect Archaea, she needs to make Kanak believe that she is capable of meeting his expectations. She delicately places her hand over his as the priest recites the words of the wedding. They need to become husband and wife, and not enemies on a battlefield. When the priest asks them to kiss, thus sealing the union, Eusebia raises her gaze towards Kanak as he gently touches her face. He still looks exactly the same, she thinks, with an almost nostalgic tone. But unlike the past, when he seemed more like a god than a man to her, now, after everything she has witnessed, he no longer inspires her with reverence. As his lips approach hers, she can only think that this is not a marriage, but a tool she will use to maintain peace. Therefore, no matter what happens, her heart must remain indifferent. But her reasoning is interrupted by the surprise of his kiss. Kanak kisses her passionately, invading her mouth with his tongue as he pulls her even closer to him. The surprise makes her try to pull away from him for a moment. Realizing this, he interrupts the kiss and looks at her. She, extremely embarrassed, has cheeks redder than a bell pepper. The guests are also surprised and slightly embarrassed by the intensity of that kiss in public, except for Dietrich, who looks extremely irritated. Eusebia tries to organize her thoughts after the intense kiss, taking a deep breath as she tries to regain her composure. Worried, Kanak calls her name, asking if she is okay. This time, unlike her past life, there was no banquet after the wedding. And as soon as the wedding was over, Kanak's soldiers began to prepare for departure. For some reason, the commission seemed to be in a hurry to leave. Eusebia looks thoughtfully at the castle of Archaea, as if she wants to memorize every detail before leaving for Riadon. She is wearing the necklace with the blue pendant that her brother gave her, which reveals that she accepted Dietrich's proposal to become his spy. Bia remembers Dietrich's sickly smile when she accepted the necklace, hearing him say that her decision was a step on the path to Archaea's salvation. Her thoughts are interrupted by Kanak's voice, who approached her and said that, by the look on her face, leaving Archaea must be extremely painful. Eusebia stares at Kanak, and her thoughts automatically flow to the concern for her duty as a wife. If he realizes that she cannot give him an heir, everything could crumble, and her plans to prevent a war from starting will go down the drain. But Kanak looks thoughtfully at Bia's face, and this makes him remember something. He asks for permission and starts to walk towards the carriage that will take Eusebia. Looking at the carriage, he says that he knows it is considered a taboo in Archaea for newlyweds to share the same carriage, but he insists that he cannot allow her to be alone, especially seeing her so downcast about leaving Archaea. With those words, he kneels on the ground in front of the carriage. Soon after, he looks at Eusebia and extends his hand towards her, clearly being a knight and helping her to board the carriage. Eusebia is surprised and worried to see the Emperor kneeling before her. But noticing her reaction, he says that if she doesn't want the Emperor to remain kneeling, she should hurry and get into the carriage. Bia accepts Kanak's kindness, unable to stop thinking about how everything was happening in such a curious and different way this time, so distinct from what she experienced in her past life. First was his visit before the wedding, and now he was kneeling before her. She knows that no matter how much things have changed, she should remain indifferent. Still, blushing slightly, Bia admits to herself that she cannot help but feel a slight attraction that did not exist before. Our protagonist wonders if these changes mean a brighter future for everyone, or if they are just a harbinger of disaster. Kanak, noticing Eusebia distractedly looking out the window since the moment they entered the carriage, asks her if she is very upset. She looks at him, not understanding why he thinks she is upset. He replies that, from the expressions on her face, either she is upset about something, or she is planning her escape route from a marriage she never wanted. Bia is clearly irritated by Kanak's comment, saying that he is making an absurd accusation against her. She places her hand over her chest as if making an oath, and proudly declares that, as his legitimate wife, she must now fulfill all the duties of a consort empress. Kanak crosses his arms and lets out a small, sarcastic laugh upon hearing the word duties. He then asks Bia if all princesses are as devoted as she is. A bit irritated, he continues to question her ironically, asking if she was just fulfilling her duty when she kissed the man she despises so much at the altar. Eusebia, not understanding Kanak's reaction, looks at him confused. She apologizes for being so direct but cannot help but ask him, "What is his problem? You seem to believe that I can't even stand to look at you." Bia tells Kanak, trying to understand his stance. Cunning sighs, bringing his hand to his forehead thoughtfully. He then admits that, in fact, there is something he has wanted to ask her since the moment they met. He looks at her and asks, "What kind of person am I in your eyes?" An unexpected and dangerous question, which leaves our protagonist a bit worried and anxious. She begins to recite as if she were reading a book. Stories of your brave deeds had reached my ears long before the marriage negotiations began, including the matter of your origin, of course. Cunning, clearly dissatisfied, states that he is not interested in the stories people tell about him. What he wants to know is what she really thinks of him. Looking into her eyes, he asks, "Who am I to Eusebia Cataril? Do you see me as a hero?" The question, accompanied by genuine curiosity in his words, surprises Eusebia. She stammers, trying to find an answer, while memories of what happened in her previous life begin to flood her mind. Seeing her frightened expression, Cunning concludes that he was right, and that no matter how much they are married now, she cannot even hide how much she hates him. He says she turned pale as snow after the wedding ceremony ended, as if she found the whole event repulsive. "You really find this marriage repulsive? Unfortunately, my suspicions were correct," says Cunning, looking out the carriage window. Eusebia seems to wake from her shock when Cunning finishes speaking. She realizes she cannot let him nullify the marriage. She quickly stands up, asserting that he misunderstood everything and that she does not find him or the marriage repulsive. Concerned, Cunning tells Bia that she should sit down as it is dangerous to stand and she might lose her balance. As soon as he says this, something outside startles the horse pulling the carriage, causing it to stop abruptly. Inside the carriage, Eusebia stumbles and loses her balance with the sudden stop. She closes her eyes tightly, bracing for the pain from the likely fall. But instead, she feels someone holding her. Cunning embraced her, pulling her close and preventing her from getting hurt. He calls her by name and with a worried voice asks if she is hurt, while Bia looks at him embarrassed. Suddenly, however, Eusebia tenses up, her gaze fixed, as if she were terrified of something. Noticing her tension, Cunning runs his hand through Bia's hair, concerned, and asks if she is feeling pain. The moment is interrupted by one of Cunning's soldiers, who outside asks if he and the consort empress are all right. Cunning, still holding Eusebia, asks the soldier why they stopped so suddenly. The soldier bows, apologizing for the inconvenience, and informs that a tree has fallen on the road, blocking the way. However, he adds that the other soldiers are already resolving the issue and that they should be leaving soon. Cunning finds it strange, as it had not even been 2 days since they entered Archaea, and that tree was still standing. Upon hearing this, Bia begins to tremble. He feels her trembling hand on his chest and looks at his wife. Eusebia appears overwhelmed by fear. Her body visibly shakes, her fists clenched against her chest as if trying to contain the anguish that overwhelms her. Sweat runs down her face, and her wide blue eyes reflect the terror and tension that invade her at that moment. Our protagonist tells us that the power of the Guardians comes directly from Argonwood, and that, upon leaving the territory of Archaea, they are deprived of this blessing. A frightening truth that Dietrich had confided to her on the night before the wedding. At first, she believed he was lying just to scare her and force her to stay by his side. But Bia feels the magic draining away, as if it were slowly leaving her body, confirming Dietrich's terrible warning. And without her powers, she fears she won't be able to defend or protect herself. As she concludes this thought, Eusebia looks terrified in the direction of the trees. The ghost of the past returns to haunt her, whispering in her ear that all of this must be part of Dietrich's plan to assassinate her. In the end, he must have decided that killing you and blaming Cunning for your death to start a war is a simpler path. Poor Eusebia. Once again you will perish here, alone and in despair, mocks the ghost. Bia covers her ears with her hands, trying to block them out, as tears stream down her face. In despair, she cries and pleads for the ghost to stop talking. Cunning reaches out his hand towards Eusebia. He pulls her close and embraces her. With a firm voice, he asks her to breathe deeply and slowly. He asks her to look around, assuring her that nothing has happened and that she is safe. But even though she has stopped crying a bit, she is still trembling and gasping. While gently stroking her hair, Cunning continues in a calm yet firm tone, saying that there is no one there who wants to hurt her. Upon hearing Cunning's voice, she begins to calm down. Still shaken by fear, Eusebia finds comfort in Cunning's presence, burying her face in his chest while her fingers grip tightly onto the fabric of his clothing. The gesture, delicate yet filled with desperation and vulnerability, is an attempt to convince herself that she is safe. The scene shifts to a port illuminated by the starry night, signaling that the long journey by land to Riadon is coming to an end. The lights of the vessels in the lighthouse reflect on the dark waters, announcing that the next leg of the journey will be by sea. "I owe you an apology," Kanak says to Bia. Kanak sighs and replies that it is because he bothered her all day, and perhaps because of that, the journey to the port was even more exhausting for her. Kanak admits that he had deliberately sought her attention because he had the impression that Eusebia did not hold him in high regard. He states that, even knowing that a woman of her caliber would not be satisfied by his side, it is still hard to accept the truth. As he utters these words, Kanak tightens the fabric of his own clothing, revealing the tension and weight of his confession before Eusebia. He looks her in the eyes, determined, and says that it matters what she thinks of him. He will not annul the marriage, because he gives her his word that the peace between their kingdoms will remain intact. Blushing slightly, he simply asks her to please try to see him differently, as seeing her look at him with so much fear in her eyes saddens him. Eusebia looks at Kanak, curious and surprised. In her thoughts, she finally seems to understand why he is so different from her previous life. Because in the past, she never had the chance to truly talk to him. That is why she had never really thought about getting to know him for real before that day. With a hint of a smile, she asserts that she did not lie when she said she knew the stories of his deeds. "Oh, the irony," thinks Bia, recalling that in order to gain more knowledge and better understand her enemy, she began to follow the records of Kanak's rise to power. Only that, the more she read about him, the more she began to doubt whether he was really the same person she had known in her past life. A former slave who fought to free others like him from the clutches of the old emperor. A cruel tyrant who kept everyone under oppression. This man, could he... Remembering this, Bia looks at Kanak and states that she does not fear him, nor does she dislike this marriage. "Thank you for helping me calm down back then, Kanak," says Eusebia. Upon hearing her call him by name, he is genuinely surprised. Embarrassed by Kanak's surprise, Bia plays with a strand of hair between her fingers while reminding him that he himself had asked her to call him by name. But the cute moment is interrupted by a voice from outside the carriage, informing His Majesty that they were approaching the port. Upon hearing this, Bia quickly moves closer to the window. Eusebia's face lights up, impressed by the sight. The port shines under the moonlight, reflected in the deep blue sea. Large ships with their sails raised wait anchored, while illuminated towers and lighthouses guard the entrance. That sight was also a confirmation that the future had begun to change. She is still alive and breathing, and still no war has begun between Archaea and Riadon. What lies ahead is still a mystery, but everything will be fine, says Eusebia aloud as she watches the carriage approach the majestic ship docked at the port. The scene cuts to a man hurriedly getting ready, adjusting his clothes in a rush while grumbling about what His Majesty is doing. The man with green hair is incredulous, not understanding why the wedding ceremony ended so quickly. Did he really run out of the chapel right after the vows? He asked the other man accompanying him, unable to comprehend the reason for such haste, when Kanak had spent an entire month talking about marrying the princess of Archaea. The man accompanying him reminds him that the emperor's carriage is already close to the port. "Is it really?" replies the man with green hair as he finishes adjusting his clothes in a hurry. He smiles and comments that, then it's time to find out what kind of lady his dear empress is. Meanwhile, at the port, Eusebia, upon exiting the carriage, is impressed by the imposing size of the ship before her. Kanak, who helps her down, explains that since the journey to Riadon is long, the vessel needs to be large enough to withstand the trip. He also asks her to be careful while descending, as the night is dark. Eusebia rebuffs him, saying that he worries too much and that she is paying attention. Literally, at the moment she finishes saying this, she slips. But Kanak quickly moves, extending his arm to catch her, and wraps her in a firm embrace before she falls, preventing her from getting hurt. He looks at her, slightly irritated for having just warned her to be careful. Eusebia thanks him, saying that she really should have listened to him. Kanak then holds Bia's shoulder with one hand and with the other begins to guide her along the path. Embarrassed, Bia tells him that she can walk on her own, but Kanak insists on helping her, worried that she might twist an ankle. While he talks, the man with green hair approaches them. He says he is truly surprised by the scene he is witnessing. Kanak refers to the man with green hair by the name of Oslin. Upon hearing this, Bia seems to recognize who he is. Oslin turns to Eusebia and, with a slight nod of respect, apologizes for the late introduction. Making a small bow, he introduces himself as Lord Oslin Venar. Our protagonist tells us that Oslin Venar is a man of humble origins, the son of a fallen baron, who managed to rebuild his house from rags to riches thanks to his extraordinary talent for turning everything into profit. And the lesson he learned from his own life was to judge others by merit, and not by lineage, which allowed him to recognize Kanak's greatness, even though his origin was that of a mere slave. And as Kanak's strategist, Oslin contributed enormously to the victory of the revolution and thus secured for himself a position of power in the court of the Riodon Empire. While Oslin talks with Kanak, Bia watches them and mentally scolds herself for having momentarily forgotten about him, as his name had always been mentioned alongside Kanak's in the Empire's conquests. Oslin notices Eusebia's gaze. He turns to her and politely asks if he can help her with anything. Embarrassed, Bia replies that at the moment she doesn't need anything. Then, Kanak introduces Oslin to his wife in a more informal manner, saying that he is not just a dear friend, but also a high-ranking official of the Riodon Empire. Eusebia understands her husband's words and introduces herself to Oslin as Eusebia Cataril, but quickly corrects herself, saying that she should now introduce herself as Eusebia Riodon. Hearing Bia use her surname makes Kanak happy and even blush a little, entering a brief ecstasy of happiness as Oslin and Eusebia finish greeting each other. Oslin suggests that they should board the ship, which makes Kanak snap out of his little trance and return to himself. Immediately, he tries to help Bia walk, but she, embarrassed, refuses, saying, "I told you I can walk on my own and I won't fall, Kanak." Oslin watches, incredulous at Kanak's attitude. At the same time, the other people in the area begin to whisper about the same scene, equally surprised by the Emperor's behavior. "How lovely to see our Emperor and our new Empress acting so intimately in public," says Oslin in a teasing tone. Bringing her hand to her mouth, Bia remembers that she just called Kanak by name in front of everyone, which is extremely inappropriate on her part. She begins to apologize, but Kanak interrupts her, affirming to everyone that she is his wife and therefore has every right to call him by name. "With all due respect, Your Majesty, propriety and decorum must be observed no matter what happens," says Oslin. Oslin reminds Kanak that he only calls him by name in private. Still, the Emperor continues to tease his friend, provocatively repeating what he had said earlier. Meanwhile, Eusebia watches with concern, realizing that the exchange of jabs is starting to turn into an argument. Seeing Kanak act so spontaneously with Oslin makes Eusebia reflect on how he acts with her, remembering how he quickly controlled his own temper when he realized she wasn't feeling well. He also worried about her when he noticed she had slipped. Perhaps he is the kind of person who reveals his more compassionate side when others are vulnerable. These thoughts about Kanak give Bia an idea to end the discussion between him and Oslin. She loudly calls Kanak's name, immediately attracting the attention of both. When everyone stares at her, Eusebia hesitates for a moment, feeling the overwhelming weight of attention focused on her. But she soon regains her courage and, bringing her hand to her forehead, says she is feeling dizzy and weak and would like to rest as soon as possible. Hearing his wife say she is about to faint, Kanak reacts as if he has been hit by an electric shock. He runs to her, apologizing for not having noticed earlier how tired she was. He firmly takes her in his arms and declares that he will take her immediately to her quarters, making her blush deeply and mentally regret her little plan. Oslin and the other servants of Kanak watch the scene, astonished and shocked, while Bia screams, asking Kanak not to carry her and insisting that he put her down. Inside the ship, Kanak proudly shows the beautiful room where Eusebia will stay. He looks at her and says that if she needs anything else, she just has to speak up. But noticing how red Bia is, Kanak asks if she might have a fever. Embarrassed, she assures him that she is fine. While trying to calm down and push away the memory of how embarrassing it was to be carried like that in front of everyone, something in the room catches Eusebia's attention. A beautiful green dress that is under the bed. She approaches the dress and asks if it is for her. Kanak responds with another question, wanting to know if she didn't like it. Gently touching the fabric, Bia smiles and says that, on the contrary, she likes it very much. The dress is beautiful, exactly the shade of green she likes. While observing the details of the dress, she tries to remember when someone gave her something so lovely in Archaea. She asks Kanak to meet the person who chose the dress for her, as she would like to thank them personally. Embarrassed, Kanak says that it won't be necessary because he was the one who chose the dress for her. Impressed by her husband's kind gesture, Bia's cheeks blush a little. "Thank you, I will take care of it with affection," says Eusebia, still a bit embarrassed. Trying to maintain his composure, Kanak replies that it's just a dress. Kanak tells her that he will let her rest a bit, especially since he has some urgent matters to attend to on the ship, but he will return as soon as he resolves them. Bia seems not to understand why he would return to her room. He leans toward her and explains that, of course, he will. After all, they are married now, and that married couples should sleep together. Eusebia then remembers that she had forgotten this little detail. Realizing that this probably means they will share the same bed that night, Eusebia panics. She, assuming again that he married her to have an heir, knew that eventually things like this would happen. Even so, she didn't imagine it would be so soon. She had presumed he would wait at least until they arrived in Riadon. Bia, still in silence, tries to understand why Kanak is in such a hurry. Is it because he finds me desirable? She thinks. Blushing instantly after that thought, she realizes that even if he desires her, the moment he discovers that she is infertile, things will get complicated, and the sooner she lies down with him, the faster there is a chance he will find out. Noticing the saddened expression on his wife's face, Kanak gently touches her chin, forcing her to look at him, while she calls him by name. Bia quickly closes her eyes, imagining that her husband has decided not to wait any longer. But Kanak keeps his gaze steady on her, and explains that sharing a bed does not necessarily mean they will have to consummate the marriage. He releases her chin as Eusebia opens her eyes, surprised by his words. Kanak then explains that she is not just the empress, but also a newlywed. If they slept in separate rooms, malicious rumors could start to circulate. And that is the only reason they are required to share a room, but Kanak reassures her by saying that he does not intend to force her to do anything she does not want. Eusebia, looking away, says that she knows she needs to fulfill her duties as a wife. Even with her saying that, Kanak declines the invitation, stating that he would prefer not to fulfill their couple's obligations on a swaying ship. Moreover, he adds that lying in bed with a reluctant partner is something he finds repulsive. Does that mean? She begins to say. But Kanak, already anticipating the question, interrupts her and replies that yes, he will wait until she is ready to consummate their marriage. This leaves her even more confused. Eusebia asks why he would do that if he was not eager for her to give him an heir. He gives a small smile and says that this is only their first night together. But even so, his beloved wife is already eager to secure the line of succession for the empire. Still in a slightly playful tone, he adds that he is truly blessed to have such a devoted wife willing to give him children. The emperor combs a strand of her hair between his fingers and says she can rest assured, as he is not in a hurry. He adds that if she truly wishes to give him an heir, she should at least start pretending that she loves him. Stepping away from her, he says in a serious tone that, although their marriage began as a political alliance, he genuinely hopes that a genuine love can grow from it. Not knowing how to respond, Eusebia simply watches as he leaves the room. Sometime later that same day, Kanak is in his office, deep in thought. He recalls what happened earlier, the surprise etched in his wife's eyes, and at the same time, how willing she seemed to give him a child. His head begins to throb, and he brings his hand to his temples, massaging them. We see Kanak's ears and neck turn red as he thinks that no matter how much he desires her, he knows he must wait until she is ready. But in practice, this is proving to be much more difficult than he imagined. But then he thinks that perhaps it is even better this way, that the fact she does not remember the past might make things easier for both of them. This way, they can start anew. His thoughts are interrupted by Olsen, who abruptly enters the office and questions. What is this story about sending our soldiers to protect the borders of Archaea? You never discussed this decision. Kanak calmly explains that the people of Archaea lost their guard because of them, so it is only fair that they be compensated for it. Olsen, agitated, walks towards Kanak, venting that Riadon is superior to Archaea in every way, so why not simply subjugate that weak nation? Growing increasingly irritated, he emphasizes that Kanak did not demand mining rights or treasures from the coffers in exchange for peace, and yet he is risking the lives of his loyal soldiers just for the hand of a spoiled princess. The Emperor casts a stern look at Olsen, visibly irritated, and warns him to choose his words more carefully. For Eusebia is not just a spoiled little princess, and he makes it clear that he would be willing to give up everything for her. Furious, Olsen incredulously asks how it is possible for him to act this way, if he has completely lost his mind. Kanak, annoyed, throws the paperwork that was on the table in his direction and orders him to leave his office immediately, saying that the room is stuffy enough without him there, steaming with anger. Olsen continues to be irritated, grumbling, "What do you mean, stuffy? It's freezing in here. What's your problem?" Meanwhile, Kanak calmly stands up and begins to leave the room. Night falls, and as the moonlight enters serenely and peacefully into the Empress's chambers, Eusebia wakes up not feeling very well. She does not understand what might be happening to her, but she is extremely nauseous. Her first hypothesis is that perhaps these are the side effects of Arganwood's power fading from her body. Determined not to let Kanak find out that she is losing her ability to use magic, she gets up. She tries to reach the door to ask one of the servants to bring her some medicine, but her vision is extremely blurred and hazy. Persisting, she finally manages to reach the door. Upon opening it, she asks the servant in front of her to bring her some medicine. But upon looking more closely at the servant, she realizes, stunned, that it is actually Kanak. He asks her if she is sick. She tries to pretend that nothing happened and turns to return to bed while quickly saying that she is fine, just with a slight headache. But Kanak grabs her by the arm, telling her that it is clearly not just a headache and that she is extremely pale. Eusebia feels as if her stomach is churning, even though she hasn't eaten anything different. And all that movement makes her feel even more nauseous. She tries to hold it in but ends up vomiting on Kanak. Still dizzy, she gasps for a few seconds while the Emperor continues to hold her. When she comes to her senses, she panics upon realizing what she has just done. She looks at Kanak, trying to gauge how furious he must be. But he is silent, just looking, only looking at his shirt, now soaked with vomit, and processing what happened. Eusebia takes a few steps back, instinctively distancing herself from him. Kanak sighs and says that she should let him call the doctor to examine her. But she trembles in panic and continues to back away, as if she hadn't heard what he just said. With her head spinning and her vision still blurry, she starts to apologize to him for what she did. Trying to think of a way to get out of that situation unscathed, she becomes even more desperate. Remembering that during the carriage ride, things hadn't gone very well, and that Kanak still believes she feels repulsed by him. And now I've gone and soiled his clothes too. He must be furious, Eusebia thinks, sinking deeper into panic, concluding that it wouldn't be surprising if he started to rethink their marriage. And at that moment, with her practically in a frenzy, the ghost of her past self returns to haunt her. It floats around Eusebia, mocking her and saying that she is incompetent, unable to do anything right, that she can't even do the bare minimum to please the Emperor. The ghost whispers in Bia's ear that she is sterile, and moreover has lost the magic she once had, the two only things that Kanak wanted from her. If she keeps making silly mistakes, her life will be ruthlessly cut short. And along with it, Archaea will also fall. I'm so sorry, Your Majesty. I will clean up this mess immediately, she says with a trembling voice, still trying to remedy the situation. Kanak tells her that she doesn't need to worry about that she should focus on herself, as she is clearly feeling unwell. Still trembling, Eusebia moves a little closer to him, not understanding why he is being so kind, even after she has soaked his clothes in such a disgusting way. Realizing that his words seem not to be reaching Eusebia, he begins to take off his shirt. With his muscular chest exposed, he looks at his wife with a calm expression and, in a soothing tone, says, "There, problem solved." Explaining that he will simply put on a clean t-shirt and that it will be as if nothing happened, he emphasizes that she shouldn't feel guilty about something so trivial. But Bia insists on apologizing, saying that she fears she has displeased him. "And why should I be displeased?" he questions as he buttons up the clean shirt he just put on. He sits next to her, explaining that it would be monstrous to be angry or irritated with someone who is clearly suffering from seasickness. Bia, not being familiar with the expression, repeats the word as a question. Kanak gently rests his hand on Eusebia's forehead, explaining that it is exactly that. Seasickness, or dizziness from the sea. Realizing that she probably had never experienced that before, Kanak makes a rhetorical question, commenting that this must be Eusebia's first time on a boat. He blames himself for not having thought of that while preparing everything to welcome her, but assures Eusebia that he has solved the problem and that it shouldn't bother her again. Trying to ease the tension of the moment and make Eusebia more comfortable, Kanak comments that this situation reminds him of the time he was on the battlefields. He recounts that back then, he was always traveling from one battlefield to another. That's how he met a young man who began to follow him persistently, begging to be allowed to join the revolution. And this young man was an extremely persistent flatterer. Until one day on the way to a new battlefield, they came across a decapitated body. And the poor flatterer's stomach couldn't handle the sight, causing him to throw up everything he had eaten that morning. Kanak asks Eusebia if she could guess who the young man was. Visibly curious and entertained by the story, she simply shakes her head in denial. He then reveals that the flattering young man was Oslin. Incredulous, she asks if it was the same Oslin Vaynar she had met recently. Kanak just nods in confirmation. And instead of apologizing for having vomited, Kanak says while continuing the story, giving a small punch to the bench he is sitting on, irritated at the memory, that Oslin blamed him, saying that everything happened because he chose the road that led them to that scene. Incredulous with the story, Eusebia brings her hand to her mouth, trying to contain her laughter. But she can't help it and starts to laugh out loud, saying she never would have imagined that Oslin was such a delicate young man. The sight of his beloved wife laughing so spontaneously leaves Kanak mesmerized. Trying to maintain his composure, Kanak clears his throat and comments that after a few years, Oslin conveniently chose to forget how much of a crybaby he used to be in the past. Kanak explains that this is how the magic of time works. After a few trips, Eusebia will already be used to the sea breeze and won't even remember that she had seasickness. And what happened today will be nothing more than a tiny memory, like a small drop in the ocean. Kanak's kind words leave Bia thoughtful. She wonders if this is how he feels about the horrible things he had to witness in his past when he was still young. Just a small drop in the vast ocean of memories in his mind. If that is the case, how cruel must life have been for him? This makes Eusebia wish to know more about the true Kanak Riordan, and not just the cruel and rude man portrayed by the chronicles and rumors. The scene cuts to a man running, breathless, worried because he is very late. He knocks with trembling hands on the door. The knocks echo through the door and a voice calls for His Majesty. Inside the room, Kanak, standing next to Eusebia, immediately recognizes and calmly comments that it must be him. Eusebia gets up from the sofa where she was lying and asks if Kanak was expecting someone. Responding that yes, he explains that he had requested the presence of the royal doctor. Her question reminds him of the doctor's delay, and Kanak starts to grumble, irritated, complaining that a royal doctor should always be ready to work as quickly as possible. Eusebia, in turn, calms him down, reminding him that it is still dark outside and that it is the middle of the night. Kanak responds to the knocks, irritated, asking what the hell he is waiting for, demanding that he come in quickly and start working. The doctor enters cautiously, apologizes for the delay, and explains that he needed to check if everything was ready for the appointment. Still irritated, Kanak grumbles that he should stop making excuses and attend to the Empress right away. The doctor then bows, visibly embarrassed, and respectfully greets Eusebia. The red-haired man formally introduces himself as Simon, the royal doctor of the Riordan court. Bia is surprised to realize that the doctor is practically a boy, given how young he is. Noticing Eusebia's surprised look and silence, Simon feels slightly uncomfortable. Seeing his reaction, Eusebia realizes that she was staring at him in a rather impolite manner. She smiles and introduces herself as Eusebia, Princess of Archaea and now Empress of Riordan. She then thanks Simon for coming to attend to her in the middle of the night. Enchanted by the Empress's smile, Simon says it is a pleasure to serve her. He then feels an irritated gaze directed at him and, upon looking at Kanak, sees him visibly impatient. The Emperor states that now that they are done with small talk, Simon should evaluate the Empress, who had felt unwell earlier. As the doctor trembles with nervousness, Eusebia tries again to calm the Emperor, saying there is no need to pressure him, as she is feeling much better. But Kanak, concerned for his wife's health, insists that Simon must not be negligent in his duty. Kanak casts a new reproachful look at the doctor, causing Simon to quickly begin examining Eusebia. Seeing the doctor tremble more than a green stick, Bia concludes that he is probably afraid of Kanak. She places her hand over his, trying to calm him, and asks how old he is. Continuing to examine her, he replies that he is 18 years old. This makes Eusebia comment that he is exactly the same age as her younger brother. She praises him, saying that he must be extremely skilled to have become a court doctor at such a young age. Simon feels a bit embarrassed by the Empress's compliment and humbly responds that he still has much to learn. Eusebia asserts that she is sure Simon must be highly qualified for the job, as she knows her husband would never place an unqualified man in such an important position. "Isn't that right, Kanak?" says our protagonist, smiling at the Emperor. Trying not to lose his composure, Kanak confirms that indeed, Simon has an extremely agile mind and memorizes things easily. He explains that he brought him to the court precisely for this reason, hoping that one day he would become useful. After all, not just anyone can perfectly memorize human anatomy at such a young age. Simon is deeply touched by the Emperor's praise. Realizing that her discreet plan had worked, Eusebia comments to him that, as he just heard from the Emperor himself, he is valuable to the Empire and to the Emperor, so he doesn't need to be so anxious in his presence. Still a bit embarrassed, he says he feels honored to serve the Empire and their highnesses. And although he is not a man of many talents, he promises to serve in the best way he can. Seaman firmly holds Eusebia's hand as he says this. Kanak notices this but remains silent. The Empress thanks Seaman, saying it is good to know she is in good hands. Seaman prescribes some medication for Eusebia and leaves, leaving her and Kanak alone again. Kanak comments that Seaman is an extremely shy boy who rarely approaches people. Seeing how he acted with Bia, he concludes that he must have had an excellent first impression of her. Eusebia, who had just taken her medication, comments that this is a good thing. Bia affirms that yes, after all, it is good for her to get closer to the people who are part of his inner circle. She then asks if he sees any problem with that. Perhaps out of jealousy, Kanak questions her if holding Simon's hand is the way she found to get closer to him. Eusebia is startled to notice her husband's clearly upset tone. She approaches her husband and apologizes to him, believing that he probably expects his wife to keep a certain distance from other men. Kanak says she doesn't need to apologize as he wasn't trying to scold her or give her a moral lesson. Even so, Eusebia explains that Simon reminds her of her younger brother and that, seeing him feeling so pressured, she couldn't just stay quiet and do nothing. Bia continues explaining that, regarding holding Simon's hand, she was merely following her husband's example. When he held her in the carriage while she was panicking, it gradually calmed her down. Eusebia explains that it was he who showed her how the comforting touch of someone can help in moments of panic. But in the future, she promises to be more mindful of how she approaches others. Kanak is slightly touched by his wife's observation and, as if remembering something, begins to search for something in his pocket. When she opens her mouth to ask what he is doing, Kanak puts a candy in her mouth. Chewing, Eusebia asks what it is, and he explains that it is a candy to take away the bitter taste of the medicine she had to take. She lights up upon realizing the flavor of the candy Kanak gave her and asks if it is raspberry candy, revealing that this is her favorite flavor. Kanak, seeing his wife happy, hands her a jar with the rest of the candies, saying she can eat as much as she wants since they are her favorites. While Eusebia chews excitedly, he can't help but mentally compare her to a cute rabbit. Eusebia, with her eyes shining with joy, declares that she is eating until she is completely satisfied. He approaches her and comments that she is eating so eagerly that she looks like a little rabbit nibbling on a leaf. They exchange glances for a second in silence, and the closeness of Kanak's face to hers makes our protagonist's cheeks flush immediately. Kanak quickly stands up, interrupting the romantic tension between them. He says that the medicine Simon gave her should start taking effect and that she should try to sleep a little. As he steps away, she asks if he isn't going to sleep too, but Kanak replies that he still needs to review some documents. But he adds that he asked for the documents to be brought there, so he can keep her company while he works. Moreover, he admits that he doesn't feel comfortable leaving her alone until he is sure she is okay. He wishes her a good sleep and assures her that she can rest easy, as he will be by her side. The night goes on as Kanak is focused on reading the documents at a table near the bed where Eusebia is sleeping. She wakes up and watches him for a few moments. He really had kept his promise and hadn't left the room. In her thoughts, she acknowledges that he is not offended by her lack of etiquette and, on the contrary, shows care and genuine concern for her well-being. Does he really see me as a wife who must learn to love and protect? Eusebia questions herself silently. If this political marriage can bring lasting peace between their peoples, perhaps she can also learn to love and protect him. But suddenly, the image of Dietrich appears in her mind, saying that it was a dream beyond her reach. Startled by Dietrich's words echoing in her mind, Eusebia suddenly awakens, trembling under the covers. She grips the bedsheet, tormented by the thought that she has omitted some things from Kanak, especially the fact that she will never be able to give him the heir he desires. And as soon as he finds out, he will probably discard her without hesitation. And all his kindness and generosity would turn into cruelty in no time. She tightly closes her eyes, scolding herself for dreaming too much. She knows she cannot lose focus and is there to protect Archaea from being destroyed. For a minute, she wonders if she should let Kanak perceive her concerns. Perhaps he would help her. Denying the last thought, Eusebia turns in bed, hiding her face in the pillow as her thoughts torment her. Certain that if Kanak discovers the truth, it will all have been in vain. Unaware of his wife's whirlwind of thoughts, Kanak glances briefly at the bed, as if he could somehow feel the anguish of his beloved. The next morning, the ship sails majestically across the seas. Eusebia, who had fallen asleep after that whirlwind of thoughts, wakes up and, still drowsy, realizes that Kanak has gone somewhere. The scene cuts to a maid suggesting with concern that Eusebia rest a little longer so she can fully recover. Wearing Kanak's gift, our beautiful protagonist tells the maid that she feels rejuvenated after a good night's sleep and that a brief walk outside will do her good. As she walks outside, Eusebia says that besides this being her first time traveling by ship, it would be a waste to sleep the whole time inside the cabin. As soon as she steps into the outdoor area, a gust of wind and brightness hits her squarely. But when she looks outside, her eyes widen in surprise, and the flush on her face reveals the sudden impact of the sight before her. Before her, the sea stretches vast and shimmering, an infinite blue carpet reflecting the intense glow of the sun. So, this is what the sea really looks like, she thinks, amazed. But she is startled by the firm voice echoing in the distance. Hail to the Empress. She turns with a gentle smile and greets the soldiers who saluted her. They seem a bit tense, and Eusebia notices they carry the same look as Oslin when she first met him, a clear sign that they are still cautious and suspicious of her. She understands their concern. After all, to those men, she is nothing but a stranger. Moreover, Riadon is a newly emerged empire. What Kanak really needs is not the magical pedigree of Archaea, but rather a consort from the nobility of Riadon, capable of helping him gain greater support from his subjects. Yet, instead of meeting his people's expectations, Kanak chose to marry a foreign princess from a small, crumbling kingdom. Hence, their barely concealed distrust. Or even a clear and open, "I don't like you." Bia reflects, worried about what awaits her in Riadon. Eusebia is pulled from her thoughts by Simon's voice, calling her with some urgency. He runs towards her, happy to have finally found her. He had been searching for her all over the ship. Eusebia steps forward, saying that if he is worried about her discomfort yesterday, she assures him that she is feeling well and that the medicine he gave her worked like magic. But Simon says he is concerned about her catching a cold from being outside for too long since it is a bit chilly. And if it comes to that, know that your negligence will not be overlooked, court physician, says Kanak's deep voice, making Simon panic. Approaching Eusebia, Kanak says he was worried when he returned to the cabin and did not find her. He picks her up, saying that they should return inside. She asks him to put her down, but he argues that the ship is rocking too much and he doesn't want to see her slip again. Meanwhile, Simon sighs in relief that he won't be facing Kanak's wrath today. Kanak carries her through the ship's internal corridors while she protests, asserting that their subjects must hate seeing their emperor act that way. He then retorts ironically, asking if now the problem is his etiquette. Worried, she explains that he is a figure of authority for his people, and that it is inappropriate to be seen carrying a woman in his arms everywhere. He suddenly calls her by name, making her heart race. Kanak brings his face close to hers, making her blush as he says he has something he should have told her, saying that he has something he should have mentioned to her earlier. He gently rests his forehead against hers and declares tenderly that this is the reason he sought the crown. With a firm voice, Kanak reveals his ideal. He wanted to change things, to build a country where everyone could live in freedom, free from the chains of etiquette and hierarchy. As he settles her on the bed, he asserts that she should not worry about what his subjects will think, for those who serve him closely have learned to respect him for who he truly is, and those who dared to underestimate him have long since gone. Eusebia gets up to argue with him, but ends up bumping into some books that were on the bed. She curiously looks at two colorful covered books. Holding one of them in her hand, she looks at Kanak and asks what they are. He says he brought the books for her while she was sleeping so that she would have something to pass the time with since there isn't much to do in the cabin. Bia is impressed to realize that there are books inside the ship. Kanak then explains that they are excellent company for long journeys, and that those volumes were brought from the palace library in Riadon. He asks if Eusebia does not like to read, and she quickly hugs the book she is holding, confidently stating that she loves to read. Excited, she says that whenever she has a book she tries to read, but lately she has been quite busy. Kanak then suggests that, if that is the case, they should spend some time reading together. The two spend some time reading, and Eusebia, enchanted by the pages before her, becomes increasingly impressed with the grandeur of the Riadon Empire. She turns the pages of the book and notices that, despite being old and rare, it has been kept in excellent condition. Glancing at Kanak, she remembers having heard that the Riadon Library is one of the largest on the continent. Perhaps his taste for books is the reason for that. It seems that the more time she spends with him, the more she discovers new sides of him. She had always imagined him as a brutish soldier, ready only for battle. She would never have imagined that he was someone capable of spending hours reading books for simple pleasure. As she reflects, she notices that Kanak furrows his brow. deeply focused on the book he is reading. She smiles, finding it adorable, feeling happy to see him so immersed and transformed by concentration. Eusebia recalls that reading has always been her favorite pastime. As she spent long hours alone in the palace, she found in books a remedy for loneliness, a way to know the lives and thoughts of people she would never have the chance to meet. But now, she thinks, casting a glance at Kanak reading beside her, she lies down on the bed. Now she knows what it is like to have someone who understands her enthusiasm for books. It would be so nice if the life waiting for me in Riadon were calm and peaceful. Eusebia wishes as she begins to fall asleep. Some time passes, and Kanak gently shakes her, calling her name as he tries to wake her. Sleepy, she looks at him confused. He then warns her that the ship is docking at the port and that, at any moment, they must be ready to enter the imperial palace. They then board the carriage that will take them to the palace, and Eusebia, worried, asks if he shouldn't make a public appearance first. After all, he is returning with a foreign princess as his wife. His subjects must have been eagerly awaiting this distraction. Kanak replies that in a few days he will make a public statement on the matter, and then his subjects will have the distraction they so desire to satisfy their curiosity. A little embarrassed, Kanak admits that, if possible, he would like to formally introduce her to the people only after they have a proper wedding ceremony in the capital. After all, what happened in Archaea was merely a formality, not a true celebration. Eusebia tilts her head, a bit curious, thinking that the ceremony in Archaea had been simple but acceptable. A proper ceremony will be important to cement her place as consort queen, explains Kanak as they enter the palace. The imperial palace clearly reveals itself to be much larger and more majestic than that of a small kingdom like Archaea. The scene then shifts to the maids who formally present themselves to the new empress. At the front of the group, a woman introduces herself as Marianne, the head maid of the imperial palace. Bowing politely before Eusebia, Marianne informs her that all preparations have been made to ensure she feels comfortable. Bia thanks her for that. Marianne then suggests they take a small tour of the palace to help Eusebia feel more at home. The palace halls shine under imposing chandeliers and golden details, while soft light filters through the windows, enhancing the grandeur of the place. And Eusebia notices this, reflecting that everything in that palace seems a true testament to the wealth and prosperity of Riadon. This makes her understand a little better why Archaea lost the war in her past life. They underestimated Kanash and failed to recognize the importance of understanding the enemy. Looking out the window, something outside catches Bia's attention. She points to the building, clearly different from the others, and asks Marianne why that distinction exists. Marianne explains that the mansion is a recent addition to the palace. And noticing the Empress's curious gaze at the mansion, Marianne asks Eusebia if she would like to visit the place. Bia is intrigued, as the building seems an exact copy of the royal palace of Archaea. Despite this, Eusebia replies that perhaps she can visit the place another time. But for now, she prefers to complete the tour of the main palace. Marianne understands the request, and then they continue walking through the corridors of the main palace, while the head maid explains the function of each room. She opens a white door with golden details, richly adorned, and explains that these are the Empress's quarters. Therefore, this will be her room while she is in the main palace. The room is spacious and bright, adorned with luxurious furniture made of intricately carved wood with golden details. In the center, red velvet sofas and armchairs surround a table set with flowers, candlesticks, and elegant trays. In the background, the imposing four-poster bed stands out, surrounded by light and delicate curtains. Impressed by the grandeur of the room, Eusebia comments that perhaps the room is too extravagant for her. Marianne does not respond to the Empress's comment. Instead, she changes the subject and informs her that they took the liberty of preparing a hot bath for Eusebia to relax after the long journey. Still impressed, Eusebia runs her hand over the soft sheets of the bed, while Marianne comments that she will remind all the staff to ensure everything is in order for tonight. For tonight? Eusebia asks innocently. Yes, Your Majesty and Madame will spend their first night together in the palace, says Marianne, causing Eusebia to freeze with anxiety. The scene shifts to the night. Kanak, arms crossed, is in the Empress's room, noticing that the environment is a bit different from usual. With some embarrassment, Eusebia explains that Marianne and the other staff prepared the room in a special way that night, to make it a memorable experience for both of them. Memorable night, huh? Now that explains the clothes, says Kanak, casting a fleeting glance at Eusebia. Eusebia is wearing a beautiful dark blue dress. Embarrassed by his comment, she asks if the dress is too much. Slightly averting his gaze, Kanak replies that, on the contrary, the dress looks perfect on her. Perhaps even too perfect. He states that he promised to wait until she was ready to consummate the marriage, but seeing her like that, he admits it is hard to resist. Kanak clears his throat, trying to control his impulses. He walks towards the bed, saying that she must be tired, so it would be better for them to sleep. A bit insecure, Eusebia apologizes to Kanak, confessing that she doesn't know much about matters of the bedroom, unlike him. Kanak turns to her and replies that there is no reason to apologize, as he is not an expert either. Blushing slightly, he admits that he has never had that kind of intimacy with anyone. Surprised, Eusebia spontaneously exclaims, "Really?" Kanak asks why she is so surprised to know this, and she, realizing she was a bit rude, explains that because he is an emperor, there are rules that encourage such things to help ensure the succession to the throne. He sits on the bed, worried. With a needy yet insecure look, he asks if perhaps she would prefer him to be a more experienced man in these matters. Kanak's gaze reveals his fear of not being enough, but also the sincerity and desire to be accepted by Eusebia. And this enchants her, as she never imagined that man could show such a vulnerable expression. Noticing his wife's silence, Kanak tries to break the tension with a joke, saying that now they have a problem on their hands since he can't just go out and educate himself on the subject. Quickly, Eusebia responds that it is nothing like that she does not want someone experienced. She just found the situation unexpected. In a more serious tone, Kanak admits that this is indeed a problem, as neither of them really knows how to initiate something more intimate. He holds her hand and says that maybe they should practice a little together, commenting that he heard the first step is always to hold hands. Kanak then suggests that perhaps after this they should lie side by side and see where that would lead them. Eusebia visibly blushes. Her heart beats strongly and silently thinks, "What should I do?" She agrees with the suggestion but admits that she would like to change clothes first, as she feels uncomfortable in the dress she is wearing. Bia starts to move away from the bed, saying she will go to the other room to change clothes. Kanak asks her to wait, getting up and walking towards her. Gently placing his hand on her shoulder, he comments that the dress she is wearing has buttons on the back. "I can help you unbutton, if that's okay with you." Kanak's hand reaches Eusebia's back, lightly touching one of the buttons of her dress. With the atmosphere charged with delicate tension and expectation, Kanak asks Eusebia for permission again before proceeding. With her permission, the scene shifts to the two of them sitting on the edge of the bed, still enveloped by the atmosphere of anticipation. Kanak slowly unbuttons her dress. He finishes unbuttoning the dress, revealing her bare back under the soft light coming through the window. Eusebia slightly moves her shoulder, a discreet gesture that betrays her nervousness and the anxiety of the moment. Kanak gently moves her hair aside, revealing even more of her back. He feels the urge to touch her, and his hand moves almost instinctively towards her, but Kanak interrupts the gesture. The pause reveals his hesitation, not from a lack of desire, but from the care of not crossing the line before Eusebia is truly ready. Eusebia thanks him for his help, and Kanak steps back, softly saying he is happy to be able to help her. The scene changes. We see Eusebia lying on the bed, clearly embarrassed, recalling what happened a little while ago, and scolding herself for making the emperor do the work of a servant. Kanak calls her in a low tone, asking if they are not going to practice. Lying next to her, Kanak extends his hand towards her, asking her to come closer, while gently protesting that they should be holding hands. She approaches him as if fulfilling her part of the agreement, and they finally hold each other's hands. Eusebia, trying to make conversation, asks if he is not feeling uncomfortable, since he had his own room during the trip, and now it must be strange to share the bed with her after getting used to sleeping alone. Kanak, however, replies that it is not uncomfortable for him, and that in fact he spent every night in her room during the trip. He recounts a night when he woke up because he heard Bia talking in her sleep. She was tense and clearly whimpering, having nightmares. He gently stroked her hair, concerned, and he stayed by her side to comfort her. Kanak explains that he had promised her he would take care of her, and since she was having nightmares, he felt happy to be able to stay by her side to calm her. Realizing how affectionate and attentive Kanak is, Bia confesses that he is not at all like she thought. She says that before they crossed paths, all she heard about him were frightening rumors, so she expected a bloodthirsty and ruthless emperor. But he is surprisingly easier to approach than she imagined, Bia continues, as Kanak extends his free hand towards her. She admits that she feared she was not what he was looking for in a wife. But Kanak surprises her by tenderly caressing her face, interrupting her words. Her heart races in response to his touch, while Kanak asserts that he could not have wished for a better wife, and that he has never regretted sealing their union before the altar. He glides the tips of his fingers over her skin, gently strumming her, while affirming that she will always be needed there, by his side. These words make Eusebia freeze with worry. With a more serious voice, she replies that she is happy to hear that, and that she is very grateful to him. But our protagonist's mind decided to sabotage her again, making her believe that she should not be swayed by emotions, and that Kanak is only with her because he wants a woman capable of bearing an heir who can use magic. The next morning, Eusebia notices a vase with roses beside her bed that was not there the day before. She gently touches the roses, wondering if one of the servants placed those flowers there. Marianne enters the quarters, asking if Eusebia had a pleasant night. Excited, Bia replies that yes, and wishes her a good day. Bia comments that she had a very relaxing night and thanks her for the flowers, adding that their scent is quite pleasant. Marianne respectfully bows, asking if there is anything else she would like. Eusebia notices that Marianne is extremely diligent in her work and always very polite, but just like the soldiers on the ship, she keeps her defenses up all the time when she is near her, as if she does not fully trust her presence. Not letting this affect her, she tries to think positively and concludes that lamenting will not help her at all. After all, she has so many things to do that self-pity would only waste her time. In response to Marianne, Eusebia said that after breakfast, she would like to see the castle's library. Just like the rumors, the library of the Riadon Palace is indeed grand. Eusebia is impressed with the number of books. The servant near Marianne says that the Empire has gradually accumulated books, including several unique ones that have never been published. While he speaks, she quickly turns in his direction, seeming to have noticed something. She asks if there is a section of the library dedicated to books on magic, and the man promptly replies that yes, but that this section is private and can only be accessed with the Emperor's permission. Smiling, he says that logically this includes the Empress. Excited, Eusebia asks him to take her to the section in question. She runs her hands over the books, anxious about all the information that may be contained in that place. Perhaps one of these books has information about the guardians of Archaea. While looking at the books thoughtfully, a particular book catches her attention. A bright green book with golden details, she seems to recognize the book. Could it be the one she is thinking of? She picks up the book and then walks to one of the tables. The golden age of magic ended centuries ago. Studies on magic should be difficult to find. So it is almost unbelievable that such precious information was right there all along. The Rise of Magic in the Far North is the name of the book. As she flips through the book, she remembers that people say non-human races still use magic today, unlike humans. So if there is anyone who knows more about the Archaean Guardians, it would be them. Excited, Bia begins to read the book. In it, it says that 300 years ago, swarms of blasphemous abominations invaded the realm of men, threatening even the wild body of Argonwood and its dominion, and the very earth cried in agony. And the answer to this cry was a warrior with Catarrhal blood who arrived to expel the abominations. And when her task was complete, the warrior swore to remain forever as the guardian of the sacred forest of Argonwood. Her unshakable devotion greatly pleased the goddess Fehar, who blessed the Catarrhal lineage, granting its members a fraction of her divine power. However, the fragile flesh of mortals proved far too weak to serve as a vessel for Fehar's divine power, and the Catarrhal were forced to stabilize their souls by binding themselves to Argonwood, condemned to never again know the joy of a common existence. Damn, I truly thought the brother of our protagonist was lying when he mentioned having children. How sad. I hope Bia finds a way to have children. There was only one known exception to this fate, Janessa Catarrhal, eternal friend of the wood elves and savior of the forests. It seems strange names are this family's strong point. Janessa overcame the limitations of her mortal body and gave birth to a child who received the favor of the wood elves. And so, these arcane beings who dwell in hidden lands still today lament and long for their dearest friend and guardian. Bia reflects a bit on what she just read. According to the book, Janessa Catarrhal was a guardian who lived 300 years ago. But how was she able to become pregnant, since all guardians normally lose the ability to reproduce as soon as they awaken? Eternal friend of the wood elves? Bia wonders what Janessa might have done to deserve such a title. As the records ended there, she concluded she should probably seek out these elves and obtain more information about Janessa. Bia wonders where she could find such elves. But she is pulled from her thoughts when someone calls her name. She stands up, surprised, and looks toward the voice. And she sees Cunning standing near the entrance of the library. He asks what she is still doing there. As they walk through the palace, he lightly scolds her for skipping meals and says it was somewhat funny seeing her servants running around in panic, not knowing where the Empress had been all day. Bia looks at Cunning and apologizes for worrying everyone, including him. And making a cute face, she explains she lost track of time. Cunning protests, surprised, saying that making a cute face won't work, then asks if she has any idea how worried he was. Keeping her innocent gaze, Bia asks if he is angry. Cunning replies that he is not, but then asks her to forget what he said and apologizes for raising his voice when he scolded her, which leaves Bia confused because he did not yell at her like he claims he did. He gently takes her hand and says he will not lock her up for spending time in the library, but she needs to take care of herself because she is very fragile, and he gets worried about her falling ill for not taking care of herself. Cunning admits he had the impression something like this would happen because he knew she loves reading. Coming a bit closer to her face, he says, in a tone full of affection and concern, that he should have been more attentive to her needs. He finishes the sentence by stepping away from Bia, leaving her hanging as if teasing her and at the same time punishing her for not taking care of herself. At the door, he turns to Bia with a smile on his face and calls her to see something. She walks curiously to the glass door. Then she finds herself before a beautiful garden inside a greenhouse. She asks curiously what that place is. Cunning answers by explaining that the place is a garden made with her in mind. He says it is the least he could do to impress the princess of Archaea. Bia, loving the place, approaches a flower bed. She looks at the beautiful flowers and then gently touches one of them. Then she gives a sincere smile and says that everything there is simply lovely. Cunning asks if those flowers aren't her favorites, and Bia confirms that yes. She likes small and delicate flowers, especially when they come in a variety of colors. He says now in a calmer and gentler tone that he is happy she found something to keep herself occupied. But he asks her to remember to take breaks and breathe some fresh air, and also asks her to please not skip meals anymore, and that there are other beautiful gardens in the mansion so she can explore them freely whenever she has free time. Cunning adds that the mansion is a recent addition to the royal palace complex. When he says that, Bia remembers Marianne mentioning that the mansion was recent. She then wonders if that means Cunning built that mansion in the style of Archaea and those beautiful gardens because of her. Did he do all of that to make her feel comfortable outside her own kingdom? Bia stares at Cunning for a few seconds, but quickly looks away, reminding herself not to be fooled by him, though she admits it is a very difficult task when he is so gentle with her. Then she notices that a specific flower in the garden is a little strange and that the flow of mana is particularly strong around that flower. She touches the flower again, thoughtful. Cunning, noticing this along with Bia's silence, asks if everything is all right. She begins to explain that yes, she was just admiring the flowers when she remembers that using magic outside Archaean soil should be impossible, but perhaps she somehow managed to retain enough magic to talk to plants. But Bia is determined to do this without Cunning noticing. She stretches her hand toward the flower and gently touches one of the petals, and as soon as she does that, a voice echoes saying, "No," and that startles Eusebia. The voice then asks, why she came? And right after says that she needs to save herself, run away from there, run as far as possible. Bia looks around, frightened, asking herself who she is supposed to run from. Cunning, noticing the despair in her eyes, asks what is wrong, why she is so scared. But the voice continues, saying that she needs to go. Needs to go now because otherwise she will die there. Then we are transported to the past, exactly 1 week ago, to that same greenhouse, where a man and a woman meet. He asks her if she has thought about it yet. The woman responds, saying that no matter how many times he asks, her answer will always be the same. The man clicks his tongue in slight frustration and asks her to be a little more flexible. After all, things could work out well for both of them. The woman is clearly irritated by the man's comment. She firmly states that she would not be insulted. She said that if there was anything that kept her standing all those years, it was the pride she had in her profession. The man laughs with disdain, saying that pride is a lovely word. Then he asks in a threatening tone how much her pride is worth compared to the value of her precious younger sister's life. The woman steps back, surprised that the man knows about Aedes, her sister. But the man steps closer, suggesting she think a bit more deeply and reconsider his proposal. After all, he doesn't think he is asking anything impossible from her. After all he needs is for her to occasionally tell him how the new foreign empress spends her days. and that this shouldn't be a problem since she was assigned to serve the new empress. The woman hesitates a little, and the man, noticing this, says that her very presence there that night shows him that his offer has somehow captured her interest. The woman turns, irritated, to leave, but she hesitates and her hand trembles, showing her frustration. The man continues speaking, saying that he is confident that he and she can get along well. Don't you agree, Marianne? The man finishes speaking, revealing to us that Marianne may be working for someone who wishes harm upon Bia. The scene cuts to an aerial view of the city. Marianne walks through the alleys of the city, where people cough heavily, seeming to be ill. She stops in front of a house door, thoughtful and with a sad look. Opening the door slowly, she enters, announcing her arrival to Aedes, who is lying in a bed. She sits beside her sister and apologizes for not being able to visit more often, but unfortunately, things at the palace have been very hectic lately. Aedes shifts a bit in the bed, clearly uncomfortable, her face flushed and feverish. Marianne takes a small vial from her pocket and tells her sister she managed to bring her the medicine. Marianne looks at her sister with worry and begins to think about the proposal the man made to her earlier. She remembers the rest of the conversation in the greenhouse earlier, where the man told her he knows her sister is dying from a disease called rigor, and that he can imagine how worried she must be because of it. After all, Aedes is her only sister. He says he has heard about this disease, that rigor is a mysterious plague that has been spreading throughout the kingdom recently, and that a person infected with the disease, if they do not take mana potions frequently, will be doomed to die a horrible death, with a completely hardened body. Ignoring Marianne's expression of pain and despair, the man continued speaking. He said they lived in a world where magic was dying, and the cost of mana potions was increasing more and more, and that it is known that once infected by that plague, a person can never be completely cured. Then, in a cold tone, he added that it must have been very difficult for her to watch her sister suffer so much. He asks again for Marianne to do this little thing for them, because he will make sure to reward her in a very profitable way. And with the money, she would no longer need to worry so much about her beloved sister. Marianne is concerned with the word "we." She asks if that means there are more people behind this. The man gives a wide smile. He says he cannot reveal such information to an outsider, and that first she needs to accept the offer. But he says he will give her some time to think about it. We return to Marianne in her younger sister's room. She brings her hands to her face in despair, wondering what she should do. The scene cuts to Oslin handing documents to Kanak while explaining that those are the expected quarterly tax revenues from the West. He also explains that they included a set of tax reform proposals for consideration. Kanak takes the documents, thanking Oslin, and telling him to keep up the pace so they can present a finalized tax reform plan to Parliament in the next session. Massaging his shoulders, Oslin says yes, but adds that without a doubt this would upset more than a few people. The traditionalist nobles would spare no effort to block the approval of the bill, as if their own lives depended on it. Kanak throws the documents on the table, a bit irritated, and says that if they allowed that, the nobles would try to abolish the civil service exam they had implemented next. Oslin shakes his head as if mentally reprimanding the nobles, and says those nobles still believed in the old nonsense and the outdated idea that only those of noble blood were worthy of governing. Kanak says they are the same people who consented to crown an enslaved soldier as their emperor. Oslin disagrees, saying they never consented. They merely submitted, and the problem with submission was that it usually returned in the form of a revolt. Then he asks Kanak not to forget that. Kanak grumbles and calls the nobles old snakes, stating that he would have ordered them beheaded along with that tyrant, if they had not been essential in securing his throne. But Oslin counters Kanak's comment, saying they both know he is far too good of an emperor and that he would never do such a thing. Kanak says he is not a good emperor. He is just tired of spilling blood on this land. He remembers when Bia told him that he was very different from what she had imagined. And thinking, he wonders if she would still like him and think he is a hero, if she saw his past. Kanak sighs, a little frustrated, then massages his neck and becomes thoughtful again. Meanwhile, in the gardens, Eusebia is near the flower bed when someone approaches and asks if the madam had called her. Bia stands up, telling Marianne that yes, she had called her. The maid appears more tense than usual, but Bia looks at her with a smile on her face and says that there is something she would like to ask. Will Bia finally use her plant-talking magic for political advantage? If it were me, I'd put a potted plant in every room of the palace. Marianne asks how she may serve her, and Bia invites her for a small walk in the gardens. The two begin to walk. and Bia comments on how grand the greenhouse is and how she could hardly believe what she was seeing the first time she visited it. She continues the conversation while mentally thinking that in the beginning, it had been a great shock for her. Because with magic disappearing from that world, she never imagined she would be able to communicate with plants outside Archaea. She remembers the first time she communicated with the flower in the greenhouse and how Kanak became worried when he saw her reaction. At the time, as soon as she realized how she had reacted, she told him she had seen something that scared her, but that, looking again, it was nothing. As soon as she composed herself, she began speaking again with the flower, asking it to explain better what was happening and why her life was in danger. The flower told her that there was a woman among the staff, the head maid, and that she had been meeting frequently with a mysterious man in the garden, and that they talked a lot about Eusebia. Bia is surprised that Marianne is involved in something, so she asks the flower to show her its memories of that night so she can try to understand what exactly happened. A small glow emanated from the flower as it spoke softly, telling Bia to view its memories freely, because it, just like all the plants in that place, stood by her side. After seeing in detail what happened a week ago, Bia understands what is happening. Returning to the present, Marianne calls for Bia, noticing how distracted she is. Eusebia apologizes and explains that her mind wandered to many places while she was observing the beautiful flowers. The two resume their conversation as they walk, and Bia asks Marianne if she likes flowers, to which the maid confirms yes, because they are very beautiful. Bia gives a small laugh and says that is quite an interesting way to put it. But the maid says it is nothing special and she simply likes flowers. She then extends her hand and picks a small rose from the garden. Remembering her younger sister, she looks at that rose and says that, unfortunately, things that are very beautiful end up wilting and rotting very easily. And that is the only thing she fears. Then she comments that her sister truly likes flowers very much. Bia asks, sounding a little surprised, if she had a sister. Marianne answers yes, and that she is 10 years younger than her, and that because their parents passed away very early, she ended up becoming a mother to her sister. She also says that her sister has been living alone ever since she accepted the position of head maid. Bia looks at Marianne with empathy and says that things must have been very difficult for both her and her sister. Taking advantage of Bia's comment, Marianne says that nothing would make her happier, nor bring such peace to her mind than having her sister living with her in the palace. But unfortunately, she explains that there is no place for the sick there. Eusebia repeats the word sick, as if asking a question, intrigued by what she had just heard. With a painful expression, Marianne explains that her sister has a disease called rigor, and because of it, she has been desperately searching for a cure everywhere. But it has been in vain. Marianne widens her eyes in shock as she realizes what she has just said. She immediately begs for forgiveness, saying that her words were extremely inappropriate. But Bia calms her, saying it is all right, and that she had called her there exactly for this, to get to know her better. Eusebia comments that she sees Marianne attending to her needs every day, but admits that in truth she did not know who she really was, which she considered a bad thing, since Marianne played an important role in her daily life. Bia smiles and says she hopes it is not too late for them to get to know each other better and get along. Mentally, Bia admits that she had interpreted Marianne's coldness and behavior as a sign of prejudice against foreigners. But without realizing it, she had been the one making premature judgments. Things would not have reached this point if she had been more attentive to those who served under her. She thought she had already learned enough not to repeat the mistakes of her previous life. But upon reflecting, she realized she still had not freed herself from the habit of keeping people at a distance, of hiding from them without spending time to truly understand them. And that needed to change. She was no longer the naive princess who died after spending her entire life hidden in a dark corner. Now, she was an empress whose duty was to observe and guide the people of her nation. Returning from her thoughts, Bia takes Marianne's hands and tells her not to worry, because she would find a way to help her sister. Marianne, surprised, says that Her Majesty should not concern herself with such trivialities. But Bia shakes her head with a smile and firmly holds Marianne's hands, saying that such a thing is absurd, and that from now on she is her responsibility. Our protagonist is determined to stop running from her problems and hiding. It is time to try to make a difference. The scene cuts to Kanak's office, where he seems surprised that his future empress came to visit him. He asks what brings her there, and she says that since he had been kind enough to visit her in her chambers, it was only fair that she did the same for him. But if she was interrupting something, she could leave. Aslan starts to say that yes, but is quickly pushed aside by Kanak along with the documents. And then the emperor turns to Bia and says that she is not interrupting anything. and that in fact he was just finishing things up. Bia becomes excited, saying that then the timing was perfect. She blushes a little and then invites him to have dinner with her. This leaves Cunning impressed and slightly flustered. In the dining hall, the two have dinner in front of a table filled with food. Bia then comments that this must have been quite a big surprise for him. In reality, she hadn't expected him to accept since she had invited him so suddenly. Cunning replied that the timing was ideal. After all, it was almost time for dinner. But he also says he is happy that she took the initiative and invited him. Embarrassed, she says she feels a bit bad for making the cooks work extra at the last minute. She looks at the full table of food and says they seem to have worked very hard to make all of that. He seems surprised and comments that he truly didn't expect that reaction from her, since the dinner was simple, the usual. And she is shocked to hear that all of that was the usual. She almost let slip that she used to have quick meals while reading in the library. Curious at her reaction, he starts to wonder what her day is like. He sighs and lifts a hand to his forehead. Realizing what she has still been doing regarding quick meals, he says that it's a good thing they are having dinner together, or else he wouldn't have noticed, or would have taken longer to notice, that she is not taking proper care of herself. And with that, he says that starting today, they will have meals together. Bia feels a bit sad about this because she knows there is still a lot she wants to research more deeply in the library. And for that, she needs to use her time effectively. She tries to argue that he is a busy man and she doesn't want to bother him, but he counters that she is more important. He cuts a piece of raspberry cake and offers it to her, saying that it is her favorite. While she eats the cake, he asks what she has been thinking about lately. With a slight smile, he comments that there must be a reason she wanted to see a busy man like him, but he says he will always be available to listen to her. Bia, hearing that, goes straight to the point. She admits she wanted to talk about something, specifically Marianne, the head maid. Bia told him everything that had happened, and Cunning said it must have been very difficult for her. Then Bia asked if he knew Marianne well, to which he replied yes. After all, he was the one who brought her to work there, and that she is very qualified and officially trained by the stewardship. Because of this, she has impeccable etiquette and is meticulously attentive to details. Almost the perfect person for the job. Cunning adds that he noticed her frequent outings from the palace, but he had no idea she was dealing with something so difficult. He lets out a long sigh and says that no one could work peacefully knowing they have a family member dying from rigor. Eusebia takes the opportunity and asks Cunning for authorization to bring Marianne's sister to live in her mansion here in the palace, so that Marianne can take care of her sister without it distracting her from work. Cunning asks why not send the girl to the palace hospital. After all, Simon and the other physicians of the royal court are planning to begin research on this new disease there. And it is also very well equipped, in addition to being close to where Marianne works. Bia becomes excited with the news and asks if that means she has permission to bring the young girl. Cunning smiles and says that she is the empress, and there is nothing she cannot do within the borders of this nation. Eusebia is impressed and thoughtful at the emperor's words, and he, noticing the astonished expression on her face, asks if she is all right. She thinks that it really means a lot because she imagines how hard it must be for Marianne to deal with all of this alone. Cunning says humbly that he simply added something to the suggestion she herself gave. Gently touching her hand, he says that she should be giving the credit to herself. Bia becomes slightly flushed at the warm touch of Cunning's hand on hers. Then, regaining her composure, she replies by saying that Cunning gave the better solution and suggests that they should say they both participated in this decision. He smiles and says that is a good solution. Bia nods and returns to eating, mentally wondering why she feels so nervous and anxious in Cunning's presence. And with no answer, she decides to finish her meal quickly and leave soon. Cunning, observing her, tells her that there is a small crumb on her cheek. She brings her hand to her face to wipe it, asking Cunning where exactly the crumb is. But when she misses the spot, he reaches out his hand toward her and wipes the crumb himself, leaving Bia a bit surprised and making her heart beat a little faster. She thanks him, blushing slightly. The two stare at each other for a moment, both seeming mesmerized by one another. Cunning, in a sweet tone, says her name, Eusebia. Then he leans his face closer to hers, almost as if he were going to kiss her. But then the dining hall door swings open forcefully and Oslin rushes in. He says he was looking for Cunning because he urgently needs him to look at a document. Until he notices the situation he has just interrupted and asks if he is getting in the way of something. But from the sudden shock of the door opening out of nowhere, both Cunning and Bia are embarrassed, looking in opposite directions. Cunning sighs, a little frustrated, and then asks which document Oslin is referring to. Mentally, our protagonist is thinking about what has just happened. They almost kissed. Kanak's voice thanking her for her company at dinner pulls her out of her thoughts. He adds that they should do this more often and that her company was very pleasant. She nods, but then immediately goes back to fighting with herself internally. She doesn't understand what kind of feeling makes her so anxious near Kanak, and therefore does not know what to do in this situation. The scene cuts to Eusebia in her office. Marianne, incredulous about what she just heard, asks Bia if she really understood it correctly. If her sister really will be treated at the palace hospital. With a confident smile on her face, Bia confirms that yes, the Emperor also granted permission for it. So all that is left is to prepare everything to bring her. Marianne, a bit tense, says that the palace hospital is reserved for use by the imperial family and its ministers, and that someone like her is not worthy of such a place. Bia asks why she feels that way. Marianne explains that she is only a commoner, and that although she considers herself extremely lucky that Her Majesty gave her the opportunity to work in the palace, in other parts of the world, people of such humble birth as hers could never even dream of brushing the hem of the Emperor's clothing, much less receive treatment in the palace hospital. Bia comments that according to her knowledge, Riadon is a kingdom based on merit, not birth, and that since Marianne has been an exemplary servant who serves the imperial family greatly, it is only fair that she be rewarded for her good work. After all, she would be a terrible empress if she let those under her care suffer because of rules that help no one. Marianne is extremely moved by the Empress's words, and Bia adds that she should consider this a sign of their friendship and that she hopes Marianne will not refuse the offer. Marianne becomes thoughtful as the Empress gently holds her hand. She remembers how much it hurts to see her sister suffering. Tears begin dripping onto their hands. And then, crying, Marianne accepts Bia's offer while thanking the Empress for showing her such kindness. Out of nowhere, she kneels before the Empress, begging for forgiveness. Bia tells her she doesn't need to do that and asks her to stand, but Marianne refuses and continues speaking while still on her knees. She confesses that in truth, the other day a man approached her discreetly and asked her to spy on the Empress in exchange for a cure for her sister, and she admits she wavered at the offer and therefore deserves to be punished. Bia calms her, saying that she does not deserve punishment and that she was only trying to help her younger sister, and that even though her sister's life was at stake, she wavered but did not give in, which should be valued because it shows who she truly is. Marianne is once again caught off guard by Eusebia's kind words. Bia then says that this matter is closed and that the only thing she wants is for Marianne to reveal the identity of the conspirator. She then reveals that the man was one of the nobles who supported His Majesty in rising against the Tyrant, and his name is Baron Edwin. Bia does not recall ever hearing of this Baron and asks Marianne what he could possibly want by asking someone to spy on her. Unfortunately, Marianne says she does not know that information, but judging by the Baron's past, it could not be anything good, because that man is a snake. He had vanished, hiding himself after gravely insulting the last emperor, and then joined the revolution, betting that the tyrant would be overthrown, and with that he was able to return to court. With this, Bia concludes that he is not truly a royal loyalist, but actually an opportunist. Marianne agrees with Bia, and continues explaining that Baron Oslin, the greatest contributor to the revolution, chose not to accept any rewards after the revolution ended in order to set an example, so that the other nobles would not start demanding things or titles. But as a result, nobles like Edwin, who fought under His Majesty, did not manage to occupy higher positions at court. They were rewarded with land and gold, but Baron Edwin spent everything recklessly, and now all he has left is his Baron title. Bia knows that the revolution Kanak led had as its main goal destroying the caste system that only favored the already privileged, so it is expected that the nobility would be displeased with it. Even so, Bia does not understand why he would want to spy on her, since she is not his political enemy. And besides that, she still has no allies at court. Marianne warns that precisely because of this she must stay alert, because the Baron's motives are unknown. Bia remembers that in the flower's memory vision, the Baron said, "we," which indicates that there are other people behind this. Then Bia realizes something, and asks Marianne which fiefdom was given to the Baron. She answers that it was somewhere in the northeast region, on the border with some non-human races in the kingdom of Archaea. Bia concludes that then the other conspirator must be... As soon as she concludes this, the communication necklace she received from her brother glows. She feels a bit guilty for not having realized this earlier. There is only one person in this world who would go to such lengths to ensure she is watched. Bia is sure that Dietrich still does not trust her, and therefore placed a spy to observe her. Marianne sees the Empress so focused and ends up calling for her. Bia is pulled out of her thoughts at the maid's call, thanks her for having been honest and for telling her the truth. Then Marianne says there is something else she would like to say. If the Empress allows it, she would like to get closer to the Baron, but as a double agent. Bia finds the idea interesting, and Marianne continues explaining her plan. She knows the Empress would like to delve deeper into the matter, but an official investigation would quickly alert the enemies, which could make the mastermind behind everything hide. Besides, it would be dangerous for Bia to act on her own. For this reason, Marianne would like to offer herself to help her. She wants to gain the Baron's trust by accepting his proposal and then discover who is truly behind all of this. Bia becomes worried. Although the idea is useful, it could put Marianne in danger if she were discovered. But the maid says that this is a risk she is willing to take. After all, the Empress not only saved Edith's life, Marianne's younger sister, but also forgave her for even considering being disloyal and accepting the Baron's offer. Marianne says she only has a life today thanks to the Empress's mercy, so it would be an honor to serve her in the best way possible. After saying this, she kneels and begs the Empress to accept her as a double agent. Even a little reluctant, Bia accepts the maid's proposal. After that, Eusebia runs to the garden, alone. She gently touches one of the flowers. Thoughtful, Marianne's words repeat in her mind and make her question herself. Is it truly an honor to serve her? Did she really save Marianne's life? At that moment, Kanak approaches her. He seems concerned because she appears worried, stressed, and entirely lost in thought. Bia, upon seeing him, comments that the flowers always seem to be blooming and very beautiful in every garden of the palace, and that some of them are very difficult to care for and need a lot of attention to bloom so beautifully, so the gardeners must have worked very hard to take care of them. Kanak leans closer to Bia and comments that he really hadn't noticed, but they are very beautiful. Bia, still looking at the flowers, says thoughtfully to Kanak that she asked Marianne to bring her sister to the palace, and that the maid was extremely happy to hear that, because now she feels she can properly care for her sister. That when Bia gave her hand, Marianne held it tightly, very tightly. This made Bia, even without knowing why, feel afraid, because from that moment on she had Marianne's complete loyalty and trust. She admits she is not sure if she is worthy of all of this. After all, she feels she hasn't done much. Bia looks at her own hand and apologizes to Kanak for murmuring her worries and perhaps for overthinking. But Kanak replies by saying that he walks through those gardens every day, yet he had never noticed how well cared for the flowers were. If it weren't for her, the gardener's hard work would have gone completely unnoticed by him. The same applies to Marianne. He admits that he had noticed she seemed distracted, but he would never have bothered to look into what was happening in her private life that might be causing it. It takes a great effort to put oneself in another person's place and better understand each of their needs. That is why he is extremely proud that his wife is dedicating herself so much to fulfilling such an important and difficult task, and that only a true leader would be capable of that. She was born to lead, and she possesses what is needed to guide the nation. After these words, Kanak looks at Eusebia with a warm smile and thanks her for coming to Riadon and for allowing him to stay by her side. She blushes upon hearing such tremendous praise and is surprised when the young emperor leans forward and gently kisses her hand. But soon she looks at him with sadness, for Kanak's kindness makes her heart heavy as she remembers everything she is hiding from him. The infertility of every guardian and the deal she was forced to make with her brother. She feels that as long as these secrets exist, she will never truly be considered the rightful empress of Riadon. But despite the winding paths and the lies involved, Bia wants to continue trying to reach a happy ending, not for herself, but for those around her. That is the only way she will truly be able to help, protect, and guide the people who are precious to her. With that thought in mind and already in her office, Bia opens the drawer of her desk. She takes out the communication pendant her brother gave her and pauses to look at it with a sad but determined expression. She then greets her brother through the stone. Dietrich seems surprised to hear his sister's voice. He even comments that since he hadn't heard anything about her for so long, he thought she might have been destroyed by the Emperor. But contrary to what he expected, it seems she has managed to please him. Despite her brother's rude comment, Bia apologizes for making him worry. He asks how her new life in Riadon is, and Bia says it is much better than she imagined it would be. Even though she is not close to her brother, she knows she must try to gather as much information as possible, both to lessen Marianne's burden and to make the mission less dangerous for her. First, she needs to confirm her suspicion that her brother is the mastermind behind the order to have her watched, even if she must act in a way that boosts Dietrich's ego. So she tells her brother that the emperor is very suspicious and does not trust people easily, so she is somewhat limited for now. Dietrich counters by saying that from what he has heard, the emperor seems to have taken quite a liking to her. Bia asks what he means by that, and Dietrich, with a smile, replies that obviously he would never send his beloved sister to an unknown land completely alone, and that he has a friend in the Empire of Riadon working tirelessly to ensure her safety. Those words confirm Bia's suspicions. Dietrich must be the one pulling the strings and commanding Baron Edwin. This irritates Bia, but she tries to maintain composure, telling her brother that knowing this puts her at ease. She takes a risk and asks who this ally is, using the excuse that it would be good to know who is on her side, but Dietrich brushes it off, saying she does not need to worry about that and that she must only do what she was ordered to do. After all, the world of political intrigue can be as dangerous as a battlefield, Dietrich adds. But if she really insists on helping, he says there is a small problem regarding the tax reform, and that this change would greatly affect the prestige of the noble families. But strangely, those who possess wealth and come from the oldest noble lines seem to be in favor of the reform. He then suggests that she investigate what kind of trick the emperor is using to make such nobles support this cause. Dietrich adds that they need to begin sowing the seeds of discord between the emperor and the nobility, so that chaos may take hold in Riadon. Incredulous at her brother's proposal, Bia reminds him that these nobles are the same ones who joined Kanak's revolution against the previous emperor, and the chances of getting them to switch sides are low. And if they act recklessly or too quickly, the people of Archaea may end up paying the price for it. Dietrich merely lets out a sarcastic laugh and says that his dear sister is being far too pessimistic and assuming falsehoods. Still worried, Bia tries to appeal to her brother emotionally, saying that her greatest concern is the people of Archaea. Honestly, I don't understand why our protagonist still tries to appeal to her brother's common sense. He is a power-obsessed maniac. She saw what he did to their kingdom in the past. With a sickening look and a voice filled with rage, Dietrich says that if she is so worried, then she should hurry and bring him her husband's weakness instead of imagining things, and that she should hurry and use what she has between her legs to do it. He says he hopes her loyalty to Archaea still burns strongly so that she... But before he can finish his sentence, Bia cuts the connection. Realizing this, Dietrich slams his desk in anger, wishing damnation upon everyone. Then, with a twisted smile, he continues talking to himself, irritated that his sister dared to talk back. He doesn't believe for a single moment in his sister's sincerity. To him, all she wants is for everyone to see her as a perfect heroine and worship her. That's why he believes she accepted marrying a wild emperor, and that if she truly loved herself and truly cared for Archaea, she would also support war. More unhinged and overtaken by rage, Dietrich slams his desk again, murmuring to himself that traitors are everywhere, parasites who want to see Archaea perish, and that his dear sister Eusebia has no idea what he had to do to protect Archaea. Dietrich begins recalling the past. He was only 14 years old when he had to begin ruling as regent in place of his pathetic father, who chose to neglect the crown after the death of his wife. And with a weak former king unable to support him, Dietrich did not have enough authority to command the vassals or earn their loyalty. He remembers as if it were yesterday how his sister cried missing their mother, and how he had no time to mourn her death despite missing her too, because at that moment he also promised he would do whatever was necessary to protect his family and his kingdom, no matter the cost. He was prepared to give everything of himself to fulfill that promise. Until Eusebia awakened as the guardian of Archaea, and everyone celebrated as if she were the kingdom's salvation, and proof that Arganwood was blessing Archaea once again. With the celebrations came many rumors, questioning why the crown prince had not been chosen and claiming that this was likely a sign that Dietrich was unfit to be king, and that Arganwood was showing everyone that Eusebia should be crowned queen. Okay, this narrator admits that now I feel a bit sorry for Dietrich. It truly must have been a heavy burden for someone so young and lost, and he ended up being consumed by jealousy and envy. I still don't like him, but at least he didn't snap out of nowhere. Continuing, while the rumors spread, Dietrich watched Bia grow more distant from him, and this made him feel betrayed by her. Even though she was the guardian of Archaea, she did nothing to bring progress to the kingdom. All she did was erect a barrier around the kingdom, a cage to keep them trapped in a land that was dying. And what irritates Dietrich the most is that even so, the vassals and the people do not see this and continue clamoring to put her on the throne. See what Archaea has become because of you, Dietrich says as he looks out the castle window, drifting back from his thoughts. The sound of footsteps echoes in the office, and then a male voice informs Dietrich that the moment is approaching. Soon the foul-blooded savage will be brought before His Majesty, and then he will be the hand of justice that delivers his death. And with that, the entire continent will kneel and swear loyalty at Dietrich's feet. Hearing the man's words, Dietrich murmurs in agreement, clearly eager for the moment to come. He believes Archaea must be rebuilt from its foundation if it is to prosper, that what Archaea needs is not a guardian, but an ambitious leader who wants to see the kingdom rise as lords of the continent. And he will be the leader they need. He will make it happen. Meanwhile, in Riadon, Bia requests from Marianne the list of members of the Imperial Council, which leaves the maid curious. But Bia explains that she would like to familiarize herself with the government structure and division of power within the Empire. She then asks if the council has a total of 20 members. And the maid confirms, explaining that there are 20 members in total, where 10 of them are noble lords of the Empire, and the other 10 are common people who represent the voice of the plebeians. For a bill to pass, there must be 13 or more votes in favor. Upon hearing this, Bia becomes thoughtful. Equal voting weight for both commoners and nobles, the debate must be intense when a new proposal is brought forth. She then concludes that the members of the Imperial Diet must be the most well-informed people in the government about the current situation of Riadon. But Dietrich knew about the tax reform proposal long ago. Yet a low-ranking official like Edwin would never have been able to get his hands on such an important document so early, which can only mean that there is someone else allied with Dietrich, someone who is part of the Imperial Council. Realizing this, she then asks Marianne if the Empress requesting a meeting with the lords of the Diet would attract too much attention, and if it would look like she was meddling too much in politics. Marianne then says that from what she knows, the wives of the Diet members usually organize afternoon tea gatherings to create friendship bonds among themselves. So the maid suggests that Bia should organize a similar tea gathering and invite the wives, because that would be the perfect excuse to gather information without raising suspicion. Bia thanks Marianne for the excellent advice, and with that, the woman withdraws, saying she will make the necessary preparations for the event. The maid then asks if Eusebia has any preferred location for the event. Bia answers that since it is an event to appreciate good tea, it should be held in a place with a memorable view. Some time passes, and the scene cuts to the flower greenhouse of the mansion, where we hear Marianne welcoming the invited ladies. As they follow the maid toward where the Empress is, the ladies comment among themselves on how beautiful the garden is, and that despite rumors saying the marriage between the Emperor and a princess from another kingdom was merely political, looking at the care the Emperor put into this place, it seems he truly found the love of his life, which makes the ladies eager to meet the Empress. And Eusebia, stunning in a beautiful green dress, greets her guests, leaving them speechless for a moment with her beauty. Excited, the ladies praise the Empress's beautiful garden, and one of them curiously asks if it is true that the Emperor built this place especially for her. Another comments that it is truly a romantic and devoted gesture from His Majesty to do that for his wife. Bia smiles at the compliments, but mentally she is far more pleased that she managed to gather all the wives of the most influential men in the Empire. Then a beautiful red-haired lady, Duchess Evelyn Haley, comments that the Emperor was so attentive to the Empress that she must already feel at home, even while living in a palace of another kingdom. The Lady of House Haley, a family with royal blood in its veins, famous for producing several queen consorts during the reign of the Fernan dynasty, but also the first house among the ancient nobles to openly support Kanak during the revolution. In reality, everyone sitting there is, in a sense, a winner in the political game. People who not only survived the revolution, but managed to maintain some degree of social status in the empire, even after such great upheaval. For that reason, Bia knows that how she speaks and behaves in the presence of these women will open or close doors for her entry into the socio-political sphere of Riadon. Eusebia takes a deep breath, thoughtful, then quickly scans her guests and notices that a green-haired lady sitting at the end of the table seems uncomfortable, not wanting to socialize with the others. Marianne had told her that this particular lady is Oslin's younger sister, Marchioness Linbera Bruche, and something about her makes Bia remember herself from her previous life. Eusebia then calls to her, asking if she is enjoying the tea that was served to her. Linbera, who is distracted, is startled by the question. She responds stammering that yes, and that she had never tasted such tea before, and that her family has a tea plantation But before she can finish speaking, one of the ladies sarcastically asks if Lynn is aware that she is in the presence of the Empress. Evelyn addresses the Empress, saying that poor Lady Linbera did not intend to disrespect anyone, but she rarely speaks during the gatherings. And when she does, she usually struggles, being extremely shy. Other ladies begin whispering and mocking Lin for bragging about the tea plantation, since the lands of House Bruche are so cold that almost nothing grows there. One of them recalls that the Empress also comes from the north and asks if she is remembering that correctly. Bia simply watches in silence, and Evelyn speaks again, commenting that the northern region of Riadon is far too cold to grow anything, and that life there is quite difficult, even for nobles, let alone the poor commoners who serve House Bruche. She then asks Bia if Archaea is the same way, but Bia, perceptive as always, knows that this question is actually a disguise test. The ladies are openly mocking the sister of a newer noble, and this is their way of forcing the Empress to choose a side between the old nobles and the newly risen ones. And worst of all, Bia has no way of knowing which of these sides is secretly helping her brother. But our protagonist is a natural leader and knows exactly what she must choose for her plan to advance, though she wonders if this is truly the right thing to do. For a moment, all the certainty and confidence she had slips away, and she feels insecure, until she remembers Kanak's gentle touch, the tender way he kissed her hand, and the trust and pride he has in her. The doubts fade from Bia's mind. She had already chosen her path that night, when she decided to keep trying. She looks confidently at her guests and begins to say that indeed, the north is a frozen desert, and life there will never be easy. Evelyn smiles, pleased with the Empress's answer, but before she can say anything, Bia continues, saying that nevertheless, many people consider the north their home, and that home is where the important people are, but that she is flattered that the ladies of the court know so much about the life in the distant north, and that this speaks highly of their compassion for the lives of the northern people, and seeing such a display of concern convinces her that they all take excellent care of their people. Lin is surprised by the Empress's subtle defense of her. Evelyn interrupts the moment, saying that she is not sure she understood what she just heard. Bia looks curiously at the Duchess, saying that she only meant what she said, that Riadon had a harsh winter, and that she is concerned about how people managed in each fief. One of the ladies replies that in southern Riadon the winter is milder, and that the goddess blessed the south. Bia gives a subtle smile and rhetorically asks if that is really true, because she heard that last autumn's harvest was extremely scarce due to droughts, and that there are documents saying that emergency grain was distributed to those in need. Evelyn seems surprised to hear this, though it's unclear whether she did not know the information or is simply shocked that Bia knew about it. Eusebia continues sarcastically, commenting that the goddess's blessing is still far from the reach of many of them who must survive winter with so little, and that no one is immune to hunger. It can strike both the north and the south. Therefore, they must keep eyes and ears open to try to reach those too weak to even cry for help. Then she asks if she is assuming correctly that everyone is taking good care of their fiefs, and asks why everyone seems so shy to admit that they also have problems in their lands, just like Lady Bruche. Bia asks if perhaps Lin would like to share with everyone how the people under Bruche care dealt with the hardships of last winter. Blushing, Lin replies quickly that she would love to share. She explains that in Bruche territory, the land freezes during winter and harvesting anything during that season is impossible. Therefore, the emperor sends provisions every year, which are used during the winter. But the taxes to the empire are still paid during the winter with timber. They pay the local farmers for the timber harvest, and with that money, those farmers survive the winter. Furthermore, she and her husband often reduce their own spending, saving and using those savings to buy food for the people. Hearing this, Bia comments that it is truly altruistic of the Bruche family to empty their own coffers to keep their people warm and well-fed during such severe winters. Evelyn turns to the Empress and asks what answer she wants to hear from them. Eusebia simply repeats what she has already said, that she only wants to know how each fief cared for its people during last winter. But to be honest, she says she took a look at the trade records before this little gathering, and they show an enormous amount of iron that was purchased by the fiefs of houses Hele and Gauthier. While the Bruches used their own coffers to help their people, Bia would like to know what those two houses did about the matter, and what the reason was for such large purchases of iron. Our protagonist then plays her final card, questioning what the forges of those two houses have been producing without the Emperor's knowledge. Evelyn rises abruptly from her chair, demanding what the Empress meant by such a question. Was she really accusing her and House Gauthier of treason? Lady Gauthier also rises nervously and begs the Empress to listen to her, that things are not what they seem, and asks for a chance to explain. Despite Evelyn trying to stop her from speaking, the anxious woman reveals that the mithril mine, which previously belonged to the crown, will soon go to auction. Thus, she and Lady Evelyn wish to acquire that mine and use the purchased iron to build the structures needed to exploit it. Bia is surprised by this information and concludes that Cunning must have agreed to place the mines in the hands of the old nobility in exchange for their support in the Diet vote. This is how he keeps a level of control over the old nobles. While Bia is absorbed in her thoughts, Evelyn bites her lip, clearly irritated. She protests, saying that even though the Empress does not seem favorable toward them, their houses stood by the current emperor and fought against the former tyrant during the revolt, and that it is a tragedy to think that they and their houses risked their lives for the nation only to be rewarded with disregard. Evelyn then asks the Empress for permission to leave, saying that she and the others will withdraw for today. A few weeks after the event with the ladies, Eusebia sits suspicious and thoughtful in her office. After all, she has not received a single letter from any of the ladies. This can only mean that Bia likely became a thorn in their side. What I find really funny is that Bia never mentioned treason. She just wondered what they did for their people. And the ladies jumped the gun and outed themselves immediately. She begins to regret hosting the event and agonizes over the possibility that it might have been better to try earning the favor of the lords, until someone behind her asks for permission to enter. Bia allows the entrance and is surprised to see Oslin, asking what brings him there. He explains that he came to deliver a letter and a small gift his sister sent to the Empress. Oslin also mentions that he heard how Bia defended his sister during the tea gathering. He explains that Linbera was only 10 years old when, due to a severe illness and high fever, she developed speech difficulties. Since then, she isolated herself in the mansion and avoided social interactions as much as possible. And this is the first time she has written a letter to someone outside the family. Oslin concludes as Bia opens the small cloth pouch that came with the letter and is surprised to see small green leaves inside. Oslin explains that the leaves are a unique type of tea that grows only in the Bruges fiefdom. And due to the harsh climate of the region, the leaves grow very small, but that is what gives the tea its distinct fragrance and flavor. However, because it is so rare and difficult to cultivate, even he himself has only tasted it a few times. Oslin says that this only shows how much care Lin put into the gift for Her Majesty, though he isn't surprised, since he considers his sister a far better judge of character than he is. Oslin then bows to Bia, thanking her for the immense generosity and kindness she has shown his family, and that both he and his entire family will be eternally grateful. Bia is moved by Oslin's words, and this makes her remember when Cunning told her she was a true leader. She looks at the tea leaves before her and mentally affirms that Cunning was right, that she was capable of helping others even without using her magic. Bia turns to Oslin and says that it really is an extremely thoughtful gift, and that she cannot wait to try it. The scene cuts to the greenhouse annex of Bia's residence, where she invites Cunning to try the tea Linbera gave her. He says he is happy the tea party she organized with the ladies went well. Eusebia responds that she believes the effort was worth it, because she managed to become friends with Linbera and her brother, since Lord Oslin has been very kind to her since then. Cunning appears surprised and clearly a bit jealous upon hearing his wife call Oslin by his first name, since she previously referred to him as Lord Vaynar, and he asks her since when she started calling him that. Bia explains that after the tea party, he himself asked her to call him that, since he is merely her vassal and she holds a much higher position than he does. She gives a small laugh, remembering his words, because before she was certain he didn't like her, so the recent events truly surprised her. Cunning comments that she seems quite pleased with the situation. Eusebia responds that she is more than pleased. She is very happy, because she managed to get closer to her husband's inner circle just as he had asked her to. Seeing his wife's beautiful smile, Cunning confesses that sometimes she manages to awaken his petty side, and she, not noticing the slight jealousy, doesn't understand what he's talking about. He then disguises it and says that if by any chance he is taking too much of her time, she should tell him. Bia then remembers that today, in reality, she wanted to welcome Marianne's sister, because today is the day Aedes will finally move into the palace. I think Bia and the maid's plan has a flaw. They were worried about drawing attention, but won't the people who wanted to hire Marianne notice that the sister suddenly moved into the palace? The scene cuts to the entrance of the palace, where Aedes has just arrived and is received by Eusebia and Marianne. The maid is extremely happy to be able to stay close to her sister and to know that she will receive the best treatment in the palace. Aedes also seems excited to see her sister, and as soon as she greets the Empress, she runs to give Marianne a strong hug. Marianne comments that her sister is feeling much more energetic and better thanks to the medicine Her Majesty sent her. Bia is happy to hear that and says that very soon she will be healthy because the court physicians are excellent and will help her get better. She reaches out toward the young girl, saying she is very happy to meet her and is sure they will be good friends. Bia truly is glad the girl is feeling better. After all, it breaks one's heart to know someone so young has already suffered so much. Thinking this, she extends her hand toward Aetus. But the moment their hands touch, Bia feels something strange, an indescribable sensation. But the moment is interrupted by Simon, who arrives running and apologizing to the Empress for being late. I don't know about you, but something about Simon bothers me. I can't explain it, but I always get the impression he's a secretly villainous type. Bia smiles at Simon, saying it's all right because they had also just arrived. She then proceeds to introduce Edis as Marianne's sister and his new patient. Simon stares mesmerized for a few seconds by the girl's beauty, and afterwards the two greet each other a bit awkwardly. Simon, clearly flustered, invites Edis to see the palace hospital, and Bia, watching from afar, believes they will become friends easily since they are the same age, but she soon realizes they will need a little more time. During the tour of the hospital, the young doctor explains that since the palace hospital is reserved mainly for the royal family, the court, and high-ranking officials, it ends up having fewer wards compared to other hospitals, and that they use the extra resources to focus on the research of medicines and diseases. He then takes them to the wing dedicated specifically to studying rigor. Fixing the books scattered across the table, he apologizes in embarrassment for the mess, but Bia reassures him, saying it only shows how busy they are researching, and that he should feel proud of that. She picks up one of the sheets on the table, impressed with the amount of information about the rigor disease. Simon explains that the Gilead Trade Guild is the sole manufacturer and distributor of the rigor medicine, which gives them almost complete control over prices, and that the doctors there tried to fight this by developing their own formulas, but when they analyzed the ingredients used in the medicine, they discovered that the compounds were nothing they expected, likely due to some magical alteration. So they reached a dead end in their research because none of the doctors knew much about magic. So at the moment, they plan to direct their efforts toward a type of medicine that does not involve magic. But Bia, upon hearing this, says she can help if magic is the issue. Excited, she grabs Simon's hand, saying she believes they can become a great team to investigate the disease. But the poor young man becomes embarrassed by the Empress's touch and ends up startled. He probably remembered the terrified look Kanak gave him on the boat when he treated the Empress. Later that same night, Eusebia asks Kanak for authorization to work with Simon in search of a cure for rigor. Our dear protagonist feels that, although her magic weakened after leaving Archaea, she still believes it is strong enough to help create the medicines, which is a good opportunity for her to strengthen her position as Empress, and to help people by doing something she knows she is good at. She looks at Kanak and asks if he doesn't think it's a good idea, confident he will support her. But she is surprised to see that Kanak looks at her with concern and does not seem happy with the suggestion she made. He rubs the back of his head a little and then says no, that he believes she has her reasons for such a request. But unfortunately, he cannot give her permission to do that. Surprised by her husband's unexpected response, Bia asks, "Why not?" She says that both she and Simon are willing to dedicate themselves fully to researching a cure. Kanak then says that if she is here to discuss a cure for rigor, then they must have already told her about the Gilead Trade Guild. He explains that Gilead is the most influential merchants organization on the continent, and most trade involving non-human races passes through them. And even he doesn't know how deeply rooted their power is. Making enemies of those who control the flow of gold in the kingdom is not advisable at all. Moreover, the cure for rigor is currently one of their flagship products. They would not react well to any kind of interference. Bia counters, saying that she is aware of the risks, but they cannot simply sit and watch people suffer because of such a devastating disease. That people are noticing what is happening, and he cannot ask her to pretend nothing is happening and ignore those in need. Kanak insists that the court officials are working to find a solution, so she does not need to worry. Irritated, Bia stands up, saying she believed he wanted her to find ways to help the Empire, that he said he was glad she was in Riadon, and that she was born to lead. Kanak says yes, what he said is true, but it is irrelevant in this case. He wants her to surround herself with pleasant and enjoyable things, that there is no reason for her to expose herself to danger when she could live a comfortable life in the palace. You're telling me to lock myself up in that dollhouse, wasting time with tea and cake like some spoiled little princess? I did not come here to become your puppet, Bia shouts, stepping away from Kanak. He looks at her, surprised at what she just said. She, also surprised, apologizes. begging forgiveness and saying she didn't truly mean it. Cunning calls Eusebia by name, and she believes he is angry with her, that she has ruined everything. She had crossed the line by raising her voice at the emperor. She had forgotten it was not her place to interfere in matters of state. She felt like less than nothing there, and yet she had allowed herself to feel proud just because he treated her kindly. In desperation, she keeps apologizing and begging Cunning's forgiveness. Upon hearing this, Cunning approaches and asks her to stop apologizing, that everything is all right, and he has no intention of intimidating her. That in truth, he is the one who should be apologizing, because he knows how important this is to her. Eusebia then looks carefully at Cunning and realizes that his face shows no anger at all. His expression is filled with worry and fear. She then gently touches his chest and asks what is troubling him. Why is he like this? Cunning confesses that he is afraid that once again he will fail to protect the person he cares about most. See? I'm telling you, this man is a walking green flag, and yet another proof that he also came back in time. Overcome with fear, he kneels in front of Eusebia, takes her hand gently and begs her to allow him to protect her. Bia looks thoughtfully at Cunning and mentally notices that he said, "Fail once again." She caresses his face and says he seems to feel this very intensely, and if there is anything from his past that still weighs on his mind, he can always tell her. Abruptly, Cunning stands up, bringing a hand to his head. He seems disoriented and hurt. Then he tells Bia that they should talk about this another time. Cunning leaves the room with quick steps and Bia tries to stop him, but it is in vain. The night passes, and the next morning Bia wakes up thoughtful and worried because he did not return after that. She is also curious to know whom he was referring to when he said he lost someone he cared for deeply. But she is pulled from her thoughts by Marianne, who arrives carrying a small bundle of purple flowers. The maid comments that she brought the flowers to replace the others in the vase. Bia says that's a good idea and that she's been feeling a bit sad this morning. She takes the opportunity to ask Marianne whether she is the one who picks the flowers for the arrangements in her room. Marianne says no, and that all the flowers in the Empress's chambers are picked personally, one, by the Emperor. And every morning they are delivered to Marianne. This is, in a way, to ensure the Empress is always surrounded by beautiful flowers. Bia remembers all the flowers she has seen in her room since she arrived in Riadon, and is touched by the gesture of her husband giving her flowers every day. She also remembers the conversation she and Cunning had in the greenhouse when she mentioned how much she loved those flower beds, the very same flowers Marianne brought today. She picks one of the flowers and looks at it closely, when a tear falls from her face onto the purple petal. Bia is emotional, crying with a mixture of joy and tenderness because she is certain now that Cunning is not a bad person. Without a doubt, he is a good man. And even so, hand-picked flowers every day. He respects her opinions, always sees the positive in Eusebia. He explains his emotions. He isn't afraid to show his feelings. He listens to what she has to say. He communicates. Perfect. I want a man like this in my life. The scene cuts to Bia wearing a beautiful black dress as she walks through the greenhouse garden. We learn that Marianne suggested she go out for a walk because she was worried. The Empress seemed a little down lately. While touching some roses, Bia is deep in thought, first remembering the concerned expression of her maid, and then the flowers Cunning picks for her come to mind. This makes her quickly walk out of the greenhouse. Being surrounded by so many flowers sends her thoughts into a confusing whirlwind. And although we don't know exactly how much time has passed since the small disagreement with Cunning, it's clear they still haven't settled things. But as she's leaving, she hears a strange noise coming from somewhere within the bushes. Concerned and at the same time curious, she walks toward the sound to discover who is in her gardens. Bia then comes across a silver-haired man lying on one of the benches in the garden. She mentally asks herself who this man could be, since she has never seen anyone like him before. Looking more closely at the man's clothing, Bia notices he is wearing the uniform of one of the soldiers. But if he is a soldier, she wonders how he ended up there. She decides the best thing to do is call the guards, so she turns to look for one. When suddenly the man stands up and looks at her with a sinister gaze, almost as if he could hear her thoughts. She turns toward him upon noticing his movement, and the two stare at each other for a long few seconds without saying a word, until the man suddenly screams for help, terrified, as if afraid of Eusebia. And she, irritated, says that the one who should be screaming for help is her. A few minutes pass and the tension between them settles, with the scene cutting to the man letting out a loud laugh and commenting that he should have been able to recognize the new empress of the empire. He formally apologizes for his lack of courtesy and for accidentally falling asleep in the garden, while Bia watches him suspiciously, wondering who he is and what he is doing there. She goes straight to the point and asks for his rank and name. And in response, the man smiles and says that he is not actually with the army. But even so, he feels honored to introduce himself to the Empress. He then introduces himself as Jaxor. Hearing that name, Bia is surprised because she had heard of him before. Jaxor is also surprised by the Empress's reaction and asks if she truly knows who he is. Our protagonist tells us that if Oslin is considered the Emperor's left arm, his friend Jaxor is considered the right arm. Just like Kanak, Jaxor is also a former slave and a soldier who, thanks to his martial skill, rose quickly through the ranks until becoming the commander of the Imperial Army. Bia then says he lied to her when he claimed he was not with the army, that he is the commander of the Imperial Army. Jaxor is surprised that she really recognized him. He counters by saying that he is no longer with the army. He announces that he has submitted his resignation letter, explaining lightly that he is simply tired of military life. In a playful tone, he comments that his handsome face will no longer be wasted on the battlefield and that he is finally free to fly. He adds that he could no longer keep up with His Majesty's strict demands and had no intention whatsoever of working himself to death. Hearing that, Bia comments that although he could be stern when it came to his responsibilities, he was still the sweetest man she had ever met. Jaxor counters by saying that despite the Empress saying that, the man she just described is someone very different from the Emperor he knows, and that there is no need for her to hide her true feelings because she can speak openly with him. But Bia doesn't understand why Jaxor is saying this. With coldness disguised as respect, he rhetorically asks whether that marriage alliance she had formed with the Emperor was not, in fact, a disgrace to Archaea. She is stunned to hear Jaxor's comment, and he continues, explaining that His Majesty did not have a particularly friendly reputation. On the contrary, he was the kind of man whose presence inspired fear in everyone around him. And with a sarcastic smile, he adds that it seems obvious she must have experienced that firsthand. Bia becomes irritated and confused by the man's words. She asks why he is speaking that way about the Emperor. She thought they were close friends. Jaxor gives a sarcastic laugh and says that either the Emperor hid his flaws from her or threatened her into staying silent. He explains that his intention was simply to show concern. After all, kindness was not exactly the trait that best defined His Majesty. Eusebia becomes even angrier at Jaxor's words and cuts him off firmly, saying he had crossed every possible line and that she would not tolerate anyone insulting her husband in her presence, demanding that these baseless accusations stop immediately. But the man smiles once more, insisting that he is telling the truth and that he has known Kanak since childhood. But Bia cuts him off again, declaring that if that is all he knows, then he has never known who Kanak truly is, and that she could not wish for a better husband. His Majesty had always been kind to her, without exception. She concludes by saying that she holds for him the most sincere respect, accompanied by an equally deep affection. With an ironic smile and a sarcastic tone, Jaxor comments that it is truly touching to know that the Empress finds so much satisfaction in her marriage. Eusebia, fed up with the man's mockery, gives him a final warning to be careful with his words. Jaxor then turns toward the Emperor, who had just appeared, and asks whether His Majesty does not agree with what he had just said. Eusebia quickly turns to confirm that Kanak really is behind her, and blushes immediately upon seeing him. Kanak, in turn, also seems a bit embarrassed, which only proves he heard everything his dear wife just said. And that's it for today, everyone. I hope you enjoyed the story. What are you all thinking so far? Are you also completely in love with Kanak, or is it just me? And this Jaxor who suddenly appeared, do you think he knew Kanak was nearby and was just testing the Empress while provoking his friend at the same time? Or does he truly harbor negative feelings? Tell me more in the comments. And if you want more, don't forget to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss any new chapters I post. The name of this series is My Sweet Enemy, Thy Name is Husband, and our recap covered Chapter 28, Part 2. Kisses, and see you next time.